I now call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Lassay, can you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, will you please take the roll call?
Councilmember Jeans?
Here.
Councilmember Ross?
Here.
Councilmember Holloway will be here shortly. He's running a few minutes late. Councilmember Mayhew will be here shortly. He's running a few minutes late. Councilmember Lassay?
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall?
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Here.
Mayor Larson?
I am here. May I have a motion and a second to excuse Councilmembers Holloway and Mayhew?
Moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second to excuse Councilmembers stated. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. With that, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda tonight?
I have an amendment to make to it. Do we do
First,
that?
I need a motion and a second to put it on the table. And then we can-
So moved. There we go. Used to Brian saying that.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda tonight. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Sundwall.
Yes, we need to pull AB 18-063 from the agenda due to, who is going to present on that? Don Harris, who is not here and able to present, so we'll push that till next time.
Okay. All right, any other items for discussion or additions, deletions, or modifications, council?
Mayor, I believe there's one under the Committee of the Whole regarding a personnel policy. We'd like to add an agenda item for that as well for a memorial service this Friday.
Okay, right. All right. Councilmember Holloway should have a hard copy on his desk. Any other items? Okay, with the, I don't think we need to do a motion in a second on some of the, if there's no objections to the polling of the agenda bill as stated by Councilmember Sundwall and Bob's addition, then I think we're ready, we're complete with discussion, ready for a vote. So all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion is carried as amended. With that, we'll move on to citizens' comments. At this time, we'll take comments from citizens. This is a time that's not for question and debate period for the council, but for the council to simply respectfully listen to residents' comments. We restrict it to about 2 minutes because frankly, we allow comments or public comments after each agenda bill and at the beginning and the end of the meeting. So one individual could consume up to 10 plus minutes of a meeting, which we think is more than fair, given that many council members don't speak more than 10 minutes during a meeting. And the citizens of Snoqualmie have the right to have their business done by their elected representatives done in an efficient manner, or at least to get business done. So with that, I'll invite you to come forward, ask you to state your name and address for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Becky?
Mayor, point of order.
Yes.
This is to be stuff not on the agenda, correct?
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, the item's not on the agenda.
Hi, Rebecca Bastian. I live at the end of Mayor Row on Maple and Maple. Mayor, council, good evening, citizens. I just want to say that I was at a committee meeting here last Monday, and I thought it was really disrespectful for when Peggy came up and gave her presentation. I felt like it was sabotaged because people had interrupted her. They ran out of time. And I thought that was very disrespectful. There's a lot of new members on council, I get it, but there's a lot of things that have happened over the years and the roots go deep. Anyway, I don't know what kind of message that's sending to our youth and other citizens. And also, there's been really a lot of problems with staff, inside, outside, in our community, disrupting lives of the people who work here, citizens, and that's very disrespectful, and there should be another ethics committee called upon. And also, the budget. I don't think anybody should get a raise at this time, Sean. Anybody should get a raise at this time until we find out what the budget is. Between lawsuits and people writing checks, why do we know what's up and what's not? And on top of that, I'd like to recommend, highly recommend, that we start having town hall where the citizens can come up and ask questions, have a Q&A without just Q&A. And I hear that they were extremely successful when my husband Fuzzy Fletcher was mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Becky. Does anyone else like to speak? Monica?
Monica Lowney, P.O. Box 493. I just want to say that I really wish that council would look at citizens when they're addressing the council, because Peggy watched, most of you were not, and I just find that really disrespectful. I'm here to basically also state, I believe we need to have some town hall meetings. 2 minutes is not enough to get a point across for citizens. There's no dialogue. I feel that Mike Seal, the owner of Sigilla Winery, who's currently negotiating to purchase the dirt lot next to the bowling alley, being reappointed on the Economic Development Commission is a conflict of interest. That is a quasi-judicial issue regarding land use. And under the training that I've received twice here at the city, that would require other commissioners to actually recuse themselves as well as Mike, because they have a political kind of personal business relationship with him. So I'd like to see somebody from downtown like Fuzzy Fletcher on the Planning Commission, or the Economic Development Commission, or Wayne Russell, Chris Kofing, who owns a Black Dog here downtown. It'd be nice to see somebody from the historical Snoqualmie area be brought on board to the team, or the club, as I call it, to represent citizens, because I really feel there's very little representation. And I would also like to say that the five-story hotel, I'm sorry, that I was shredded on Facebook by my opponent during the campaign, is very unattractive. A lot of people are very disappointed about it, and I hope that our planning commission in the future has the opportunity to actually do sitescapes, heightscapes, as well as the Sigillo building that you're going to build here next to the bowling alley, which we know will be actually kind of a third story with a greenhouse type roof before things are just pushed through. And lastly, I would like to say, I'm still seeing no sign-up sheet. I'd like all the city employees as well as citizens to have an opportunity to sign in and document who's at these meetings.
Thank you, Monica. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? Sherilyn?
My name is Sherilyn Lux. I live at 8370 Falls Avenue Southeast, and I'd like to bring to the council's attention how much money we're paying to Pacifica Law Group currently. In the past 2 years, we've paid over $80,000 to Pacifica Law Group. I've confirmed with Pacifica Law Group that we are a client of theirs. I'm extremely concerned that we're also paying full-time in-house counsel, which is not going along with policies that are followed in bigger areas such as Issaquah. They do not have full-time counsel. We as citizens do not know how much we're paying out as counsel right now. We have no idea how much we are paying legal counsel to protect bonds, foreign relationships, political people, personal interests, business interests that are a conflict of interest with our city, things that are a danger to our community, things that are perhaps breaking laws. Our community needs to see our budget. We need to know how much we're paying legally to defend a few people. How much money are we paying to defend the citizens?
All right, thank you, Sherilyn. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? All right, seeing no one else move forward, we'll move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. And I have 3 proclamations tonight of all very worthy issues. The first is the recognizing Peace Officer Memorial Day. Whereas in 1962, President John F. Kennedy signed the first proclamation recognizing May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which it falls on as National Police Week. And whereas the safety and well-being of individuals is important to the prosperity of families and communities, and whereas police officers throughout our communities are dedicated to protecting and serving neighborhoods, schools, and families, and whereas police officers risk their lives each and every day to ensure public safety and enforce the laws of the land, and whereas the city of Snoqualmie values the courage and devotion of our local police, as our collective prosperity depends on the integrity with which our law enforcement officers maintain peace and security. And whereas National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day are opportunities to honor officers who have fallen in the line of duty and recognize the sacrifices made by the families of those officers and the families of those who continue to protect and serve our communities. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Matthew R. Larson, do hereby recognize May 13 to 19th, 2018 as National Police Week and May 15, 2018 as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation given on this day. And happy to present this to the chief to accept that. Thank you.
Real briefly, I want to commend you for joining all the communities throughout this nation and recognizing those 129 officers that gave their life this year and all those before that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chief. All right, next is the, whereas all people should have access to safe, healthy, and affordable homes within communities of opportunity, and where studies have found that each $100 increase in median rent results in a 15% increase in homelessness in metro areas, and a 39% increase in homelessness in nearby suburbs and rural areas. And whereas the combined cost burden of housing plus transportation can be substantially reduced by locating affordable housing opportunities in proximity to transit. And whereas everyone benefits from affordable housing, including the people who reside in these properties, their neighbors, businesses, employers, and the community as a whole. And whereas the Association of Washington Cities determined that enhancing efforts to address housing shortages and affordability was a critical priority for the 2018 legislative session. And whereas United in an effort to raise public awareness, communities throughout King County are participating in the local Affordable Housing Week efforts to inform the public of the critical need to preserve and increase affordable housing in our communities. And whereas the City of Snoqualmie endorses the goals, objectives, and purposes of Affordable Housing Week, and in doing so recommits itself to ensuring that our community thrives with opportunity and that all people live in it with dignity and safe, healthy, and affordable homes. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Mayor R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, do hereby proclaim the week of the 14th to the 18th, 2018, the Affordable Housing Week. And I'm pleased to welcome Nancy Jones on behalf of the Vice President of the Board at the Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank to accept that.
Thank you.
And their Executive Director, Heidi Dukic, is here as well. Heidi, yeah. Thank you, Nancy. If you could say a few words.
I would just like to add my thanks to this, for the proclamation and the fact that you have all recognized the urgent need we have for affordable housing in our valley. Our food bank has a resource office that's open 16 hours a week. And during those 16 hours, we have client after client who comes in, and the biggest worry in their life for themselves and their family is affordable housing. Will they be able to stay where they are? Will they be able to find something if they have to move? We just don't have it. So I applaud you all for promoting this week as Affordable Housing Week, and I hope that it's in the very near future that our community can be one of the leaders in affordable housing for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, and thank you again to the food bank for the great work you do and for the gift of the pear tree that you gave in our park behind City Hall here. So.
Next spring we'll be back to harvest.
That's right. We'll be looking forward to some pears. Very good. And again, thanks for taking the time to come here this evening. The next proclamation, at the risk of seeming a little self-serving, whereas Snoqualmie includes countless older Americans who enriched and strengthened our community, and whereas Snoqualmie is committed to engaging and supporting older adults, their families, and caregivers, and whereas we acknowledge the importance of taking part in activities that promote physical, mental, and emotional well-being, no matter your age, and whereas the citizens of Snoqualmie can enrich the lives of individuals of every age by promoting home and community-based services that support independent living and involving older adults in community planning, events, and other activities, and providing opportunities for older adults to work, volunteer, learn, lead, and mentor. Now, therefore, I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor, do hereby proclaim May 2018 as Older Americans Month in the City of Snoqualmie, and urge every resident to take time during this month to recognize older people, older adults, to serve them as vital parts in our community. And coming to receive this is Susan Kingsbury, who is the Executive Director with our Senior Center for the Valley here. Thank you, Susan.
Mayor, Council, thank you for this proclamation. Thank you for recognizing the important role that our older citizens have played in the development and the growth of our community. They still have so much to give. Just because they're older, just because they're gray, you know, at the temples, or a bit more, it doesn't mean that they don't still have a lot of vitality, a lot of great ideas, and a lot of chutzpah, as you'd say on the East Coast. And we see that every day. We serve about 1,000 seniors every year. 15% of the people 65 and older in Snoqualmie use our senior center. I would love to see that to be a higher number. But we are drawing from North Bend, from Snoqualmie, Falls City, a lot of people from Sammamish and Issaquah. They don't have strong, or even in one case, a present senior center, and so they're looking to us. And while that's not, you know, the concern of Snoqualmie, it does say something about the need that people are getting on I-90 or coming on the back roads, coming over the falls to use the senior center. We provide fitness. We do the best lunch that you could ever do for a suggested donation of $4. If you haven't been to lunch, please look me up on the website, come for lunch, and meet some of the people who are coming. They're really fantastic. Also, I just want to say affordable housing. We are very, very interested in affordable housing. We're trying to preserve the senior housing that exists currently in North Bend. And I may be reaching back out to you, and Mayor Matt, I might talk to you a bit more about this week. We're hoping to buy Cascade Park Apartments. There are only 67 units of senior housing in all of Snoqualmie Valley that's affordable. Half of that is soon to be sold. We're hoping to be the buyer, but it'll take a lot of political will to make it happen. So anyway, thank you for Affordable Housing Week, and thanks for Older Americans Month.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time you came to come out. And those of you that came out to receive the proclamations, again, we know that it's a gorgeous day out there. Everybody'd love to be out there. So no one's going to be offended if you want to go enjoy the evening. So, but thanks for taking time out of your evening. All right. With that, we'll move on to appointments. At this time, I'd like to reappoint Tom Parker and Mike Seal to the Economic Development Commission for 2-year terms ending January 31st, 2020. May I have a motion to confirm?
So moved. Second. She's got the move, I get the second.
All right. I have a motion and a second to confirm as stated, reappointments as stated. Any discussion, Council? Councilmember Lissay. And then
Can you
Sunwell.
describe the process for appointing or reappointing a commission member, just for public knowledge?
Yeah, so we, anytime there's vacancies, I mean, if I get the sense that, first of all, I always look for diversity on any board or commission in terms of representation around the city, age or perspective or background, depending on what the nature of the, or the function and role of the committee or relative committee or commission is. And Jody will put out a notice soliciting any kind of applications for that, and then I'll review the applications, and often, if I can, I'll interview those candidates and then make a determination on who to advance to the council.
And then just to clarify, that appointment is the mayor's responsibility?
Yes, the mayor has it's my power, I have the powers and responsibility as strong mayor to make the appointments.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's been my standard practice to solicit, do a great deal to solicit existing boards and commissions or council members on who they think would be good members to advance as a. Yeah, and I still have one opening on the EDC to resolve. Councilmember Sunwell? Did that answer your question, Councilmember Lissay?
It did, thank you.
All right. Councilmember Sunwell?
This is for the Economic Development Commission, right?
That's correct.
So did we have other applicants for this?
I don't believe we did. Well, we did have one yeah, we have one other applicant that's come in. Yeah.
And who was that?
Anna Sotelo.
Okay. So I do share some concern about having Mike on the Economic Development Commission, not because he's not capable, not because he's not a nice guy, because he is both of those things. But there is a certain matter going on right now that I think could potentially paralyze him temporarily for the ability to serve in that function until that's completed. There's also perception issues associated with that. I also see there's a fair amount of tenure on this Economic Development Commission, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But given some of the challenges we've had and disagreements we've had with folks in the, I guess, the economic section of Snoqualmie Ridge, I would like to see better representation distributed throughout I guess the business community. I would have really liked, I don't know how much consideration was given to Anna. I know sometimes some don't like what she says and how she says it, but I don't know that that would necessarily be a disqualifying factor for her consideration. So I I would have loved to see her or someone else from up there be on this commission, and I'm disappointed that that hasn't happened.
There's, as I was stating, there's still one more vacancy on the EDC that I'm trying to find. You're still soliciting candidates, and the goal would be to try and find one of the Ridge merchants to fill that.
Who is the open position filling?
Larry Fisher.
Oh, so that's the blank spot.
And Larry's already indicated he would be amenable to stepping down in order to provide that, a different voice.
I would just be curious how other council members feel about Mike being on the committee, given what's going through right now. Maybe it's not a big deal to anybody else.
Toss that to you, so go ahead and speak. Well, first I want Bob to weigh in on the quasi-judicial issue that you're alluding to.
Mayor, please.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm going to ask Bob Sturbank to speak to the quasi-judicial issue or the concern which you've spoken to, I guess, on his particular project.
Right. The public comment alluded to a possible conflict of interest or that this was a quasi-judicial matter. First, the Economic Development Commission doesn't sit in a quasi-judicial capacity on any land use application. The only volunteer commission in the city that does that is the Planning Commission, so there isn't a quasi-judicial issue there. Conflict of interest, I don't see one, given that it's the development of that property, if it proceeds, will be decided on by the community development director as to building permit or other permits that come up. Again, the EDC won't have any role in deciding that, so I just don't see a conflict of interest raised by his serving on that board. That Councilmember Sunwall talked about perception, and that's a separate matter that council may want to take up. But in terms of an actual legal conflict or a quasi-judicial bar, I don't believe one exists in this context.
Well, and I would add, and I know Catherine will probably speak to it too, because she's the only other one that's been attending the EDC meetings on a regular basis, and I've been attending merchant meetings on a regular basis, at least when invited. In both those cases, I've been just very impressed with the leadership that Mike has asserted in not only helping rally and corral and really unify the merchants in a very constructive fashion downtown. I think he's currently serving as the president of the Downtown Merchants, which I think is a really great voice to have on our EDC. But on the EDC, he has also demonstrated a great deal of just very insightful observations of issues and that retail perspective of a retail owner downtown or an investor in retail downtown. Catherine, I'm sorry, you were going to say.
Well, I was going to state that he does chair the Downtown Merchants and that they've been very successful, as well as his business. So I thought he definitely represents the Downtown Merchants very well.
He was elected by his peers to serve in that role effectively. So, John, Bob, I saw or Councilmember Jeans, your hand was up, and then I'll come to you, Councilmember Shepherd.
So it's mostly addressing Sean's concern. Even though it's not quasi-judicial, I'm sure a person like Mike Seal, if there is discussion that's centered around the further development of the King Street lot, I'm sure he would step aside and not create a situation that would create the perception of an untoward situation.
Or recuse himself, yeah. Councilmember Shepherd.
So of the people who are on the EDC, do we have anybody who represents the Ridge merchants?
No, we don't. That's why I expressed. That's why I'm still sitting on the third vacancy, trying to make a determination on that, and invite as many potential candidates to that as possible. Councilmember Sunwall.
So maybe it would be helpful if I maybe understood a little bit better what the Economic Development Commission would have to do with development. From what I'm understanding, any further development on that lot or any lot in the city, how does the Economic Development Commission touch that? And if so, how? If not, is it just the Planning Commission that touches that?
The Economic Development Commission has no role in the land use or building permit approval process. Only the Planning Commission does, and only in a limited set of circumstances, design review, and Mark can identify a couple other things.
Historic overlay. So the ownership or transfer of ownership is City Council. The Historic District Design Review is Planning Commission. That's it. this matter won't be in front of the EDC in any fashion. And like Councilmember Jean said, if it were, it would be a general discussion, and Mike's shown that he is capable of playing his role and recusing when appropriate.
So, yeah, I mean, the role of the EDC, when I formed that several years ago after I'd become mayor, to provide effectively a sounding board of the business community on all the policy making that we do, so that, their role is more to stay at a high level and just sort of, when we're doing comp plan developments and it's going, or revisions, and it's going through planning commission and council, it's just good for all those folks to have folks that are coming primarily from a business or retail perspective to sort of raise red flags and see if they say policies or changes in that comp plan might be harmful or detrimental to the business community. Just providing that perspective. So, Councilmember Shepherd?
I was wondering, what is say one thing that they've done that would be most significant as far as what their mission is? Can you give me an example?
I think one of the cool things I'll kick that to Councilmember Ross if you want to speak.
Well, I think, so a year ago, they went around and interviewed the different businesses. And so the industrial park and a lot of retailers. And from that, they came back with several concerns, but one of them was finding employees. And so they've held numerous job fairs since that time that a lot of these companies have been able to hire from the job fairs.
Yeah, and they're kind of re-ing up in that again. So there's been a few really cool activities like the job fair that have spun off of those conversations at the EDC.
Do they get into, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, get into it.
Do they go into, say, marketing efforts?
No. That's,
Okay.
You mean like marketing and branding?
Right.
No, not so much that.
Okay.
I mean, if we're doing a branding effort or those issues with Snoqualmie, we would certainly bounce that off of the EDC. Again, anything related to retail. And you may have a question about parking too, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Mayhew, did you have a comment or question?
So, I feel like I've come to a party and everyone knows the code word except me, and something's happening here. There's some concern that I'm missing because I've attended these EDC meetings and I was not aware there was any controversy with that group. And when I saw these two names on the agenda, I looked into them and I thought and I've watched them function on that commission. Mm-hmm. And I just was, there's some kind of controversy and I don't know what it is. Something about conflict of interest, but just those words themselves tell me nothing. I don't know what the perceived conflict is. So I am a little confused on what's going on. I didn't see any problem until now, and I don't see any specific problem, so I don't know why I would vote against them. But the only thing I would ask is there some mechanism by which if there are concerns that someone has, or groups of people have, that with the functioning of any of our commissions, is there some method by which that can get submitted to the city and that we as council members then can be aware of what those specific concerns are? Because there's only a 2-minute comment period, which perhaps they're just, we're not hearing about these concerns because there isn't enough time within the 2 minutes. Is there some mechanism by which this could get captured? Because I feel sort of caught off guard here that there's any issue at all.
I'm a little caught off guard too, because I never imagined there would be a controversy regarding Mike Seal or Tom. So I'm trying to get my handle around it too.
Right, so maybe now's not the time for this, but I would like to see us kind of look at how it is that concerns like this can get captured, because I'd like to be aware of them and I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, usually if there's an issue, it's brought to our attention once the agenda goes out the week prior. I mean, usually a citizen or a council member or others will bring it to my attention, or others, and that can be distributed on an email chain. Councilmember Shepherd, sorry.
So I know that Anna Sotelo has been to all of our meetings, or almost all of our meetings, and she's, really struggling up on the ridge, and she's offered to provide more information about private sector business in any business I've ever seen, and I think she's been there longer than any other business on Center Street. And I think she should be a priority over somebody who we're not sure what his priority is over the parking issue that I got a sign over there. And I'd like to see Anna appointed before we appoint the gentleman that owns Sigillo's.
Well, again, there's a vacancy. Even after these reappointments tonight, if the council were to reappoint, there's still a remaining vacancy on the EDC. And I also, to Councilmember Lasay's point, in terms of separation of powers, and we're all kind of muddling through and learning this, this is the first time I ever had a council meeting where it's sort of in a public fashion I'm being lobbied on which candidates to choose for a position. I mean, it would be, think of the president or the governor appointing members to their cabinet. You wouldn't typically have the Congress advancing different names and campaigning for those names in open session. So if you have candidates that you'd like me to consider, it would be more appropriate for you to approach me, give a resume, give me your pitch. Again, but it's entirely my purview to advance the names I want. They might not be entirely to your liking, but the question is if the red flags are on them so bad that you just can't say yes to them, then you say no. But if it's a yes, then again, you have confirmation powers, not the appointment powers. So. Does that make sense, Councilmember Holloway, to your experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. This is not multiple choice. This is true, false. He makes the appointments, and we confirm them. So you have a yes/no question in front of you, and you're all headed toward SA answers. If we don't like the candidate, vote no. But I don't see a reason for it at this stage.
Councilmember Mayhew.
So I was going to say, based on the knowledge I have, including what I've heard tonight, I don't know of any specific reason why I would not vote for these two. And so hoping that you perhaps know something more, if you think you need to look into the comments you've heard and you want to take another 2 weeks to look into that, that would be your prerogative. But without knowing why I would vote against them and knowing the things I know about them, I'm going to vote yes unless unless you withdraw, unless you want to look into it and further find out what these concerns are. I haven't heard any specific concern that would cause me to say no.
Councilmember Sunwell.
I move to call the question.
All right. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. So with that, all those, I'm sorry, is there a member of the public that would like to comment on any of these potential candidates prior to action? I'm sorry? Well, okay, I'm going to stop for a procedural issue here. My parliamentarian is telling me once you call the question, we can't open it for public comment. Now, I think call the question means you just immediately go to the vote and there's no further debate. Our protocol says we still allow for public comment prior to the vote, so I don't think call the question preempts the public from speaking. Do you have any?
Well, I think the clerk's right. Typically, it immediately precedes a vote. I've seen past practice here where the council has accepted public comment. You, Mayor, also.
So in other words, public comment would be part of the debate.
Has been called.
And the question says we don't want to hear any more debate. Is that your conclusion?
That's right. That's typically the way that motion is intended to operate.
We need to get into the practice of calling for, I think it's closure.
Closure.
Where we stop our debate and then we would proceed on to, but we've been using call the question and still doing public, so I have no objection if you call for public comment.
I'm going to allow public comment this time. When someone calls the question in the future, clarify whether you're calling kind of closure to council debate but still leaving open to public comment, or whether you just want to close it all down and move on. So with that, we'll open it to public comment. Again, 2 minutes. Anybody? Monica, go ahead.
So just to clarify what the conflict is, for those who are watching but don't know. So Mike Steele owns Sigillo, and I love his wine. I was just there yesterday. I was downtown for Mother's Day, and there was no place to park. Okay, the dirt lot that our city has given Mike an exclusivity on purchasing and building a 2.5 story building is completely an economic issue. It's going to take very critical parking that's needed for downtown merchants away. Downtown merchants like Chris Kofian have showed up at many meetings expressing this to the city, and it's simply been ignored. So I think it's wonderful that Mike's the leader. I'm sure he's a great guy personally, but that's the conflict. He is looking to purchase the land that accommodates about 50 cars to park to accommodate businesses downtown, and it's a very clear conflict. So if he is in a part of economic development and he does not make parking downtown a priority, which is, I could assure you, to downtown merchants, then guess what? He's going to get to buy his lot with that exclusive deal the city's offered to him and no one else, and build his big winery with his hotel on top. And that is not what the people of Snoqualmie want. So I'm just asking for, Anna Sotelo would be great. We need representation up at the Ridge. She's at a lot of meetings. She's the voice for people here. I know that the mayor may not like what she says, and maybe some of the council members, but I am just going to encourage the council to be firm on this and be fair. And to be fair would be to bring someone in who is not currently negotiating a real estate contract to purchase a very important lot on King Street that merchants and citizens that live downtown would like to remain parking, or have Sigillo provide parking under their building, which they're not planning to do, nor is the city or planning commission requiring them to do. That is your conflict of interest. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Monica. Is there anyone else like to speak to this item? Sherilyn.
I would also like to recommend the appointment of Anna Sotelo. If we have 3 open appointments, there's absolutely no reason that she would not be put in the 3rd seat. I think that the thing that we're looking at here is the fact that there's a conflict of interest for the mayor with Anna Sotelo. I don't think that the mayor is going to like the position of having somebody actively involved in the city that's questioning him. I think that is the issue at hand. I think we need somebody involved in town down here in economic development that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of money.
All right, thank you, Sherilyn.
That's a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherilyn. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? All right, seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion is carried. With that, we move on to consent agenda action items. All items listed below when acted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the May 4th, 2018 workshop meeting and minutes for the April 23rd, 2018 regular city council meeting, and approval of warrants as stated in the agenda packet. Other approvals include agenda bill. I'm sorry, that agenda bill was pulled. Do I have a motion for the minutes, folks?
So moved.
I want to clarify, Mayor,
That resolution was not pulled.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Other approvals include Agenda Bill 18062, Resolution 1448, accepting Community Park Trail project as complete. Thanks.
Still
for the
moved.
catch. All right.
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated.
Now we can do something.
Any discussion, council, on any of these items? All right. See no further discussion. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on the consent agenda prior to approval or prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we move on to ordinances. Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 18049, ordinance authorizing the issuance of water and sewer utility revenue bonds in the aggregate principal amount of not to exceed. There'll be principal amount defined for the purposes of providing funds to finance and refinance improvements to the city's water, sewer, and stormwater systems, satisfying the reserve requirement and paying cost of issuance for the bonds, providing for the form, terms, and covenants of the bonds, delegating certain authority to approve the final terms of the bonds, providing for severability and effective date, and authorizing other matters related thereto. This was introduced back in April 9th and is ready for action tonight. And you only just read the motion in.
Yeah, I know, I'm still having issues with it. All right, move to adopt ordinance
1201, sorry.
1201, authorizing the issuance of water and sewer utility revenue bonds at the aggregated principal amount of not to exceed, principal amount, we'll come back to that, for the purpose of providing funds to finance and refinance improvements to the city water, sewer, and stormwater systems, satisfying the revenue requirements and payment of costs of issuance for the bonds, providing the form, terms, and covenants of the bond, delegating certain authority to approve the final terms of the bonds, providing for severability and an effective date, and authorizing other matters related thereto. May I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1201 as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Any discussion, council?
And I would like to make an immediate supporting motion to change the term principal amount to the sum of $35,600,000.
Okay, there's a substitute, oh, I'm sorry, motion a second. There's a substitute ordinance. Was the only language changed just the number?
I've lost track of the is it? No.
I'm looking to staff to advise Rob as to whether it's sufficient to just change the number, or do you want him to do the substitute ordinance? I can't recall if there was other details.
So the change in the number, but there's also a change in language that our attorney could address for you. I hope you all received it.
Where did the attorney?
Or, Deanna, would you like to have a shot at it?
Thank you. So,
Deanna Gregory.
And I'm sorry, point of order, I just did it to you again. We have a motion and a second. You want to, can you pull that back for a moment until we clarify which?
I'll pull that back for clarification.
All right, thank you. I just want to clarify this before we, Councilmember Mayhew?
Just point of order, I wonder if there's an alternate ordinance, if before we have the discussion, if we could just put it up and have a motion for that. Otherwise, we're doing this in the backwards order. Shouldn't we have the motion for it and then the discussion of it?
Well, we're kind of following that protocol where you don't tamper around with the original ordinance that came before the council, so we're queuing that up first and then making changes to that. Does that make sense? Okay. Rob and Deanna, go ahead.
Happy to, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Deanna Gregory, Pacifica Law Group. It's nice to see you all again. Again, Pacifica Law Group serves as bond counsel to the city. In front of you, hopefully in front of you, you have the copy of the ordinance that was circulated by City Attorney Bob Sturbank on Friday. It not only includes the not-to-exceed aggregate principal amount of $35,600,000 in the title of the ordinance, but also that number should be reflected throughout the document where the not-to-exceed amount is listed specifically in section 14, which has the delegation parameters and sets out the parameters of the bonds are being authorized to be issued, assuming, of course, that you approve this ordinance. Another change that Bob and I had discussed and that he had sent around to you on Friday adds language to section, bear with me here. Adds language to section 3 regarding the description of the project. You received a clean copy as well as a black line copy showing some additional language added to that section just to close the loop on the discussion regarding the time frame for the expected use of proceeds. There's been a lot of conversation, of course, and rightfully so, regarding the city's expectation to spend the proceeds on the listed projects within the time frame as required by the federal tax code. And to just kind of bring that discussion to in full circle and to kind of put a period on it, we went ahead and added some language just to memorialize those discussions and to document in the ordinance the city's expectation that the proceeds will be spent within 3 years from the date of issue, or 85% at minimum, to meet the requirements of the federal tax code. This language is basically verbatim to what the city would normally sign in its federal tax certificate in the ordinary course in connection with an issuance of tax-exempt bonds, but we decided to add it to the ordinance as well, just to close the loop. The only other change...
Which
yeah,
section
you
is
bet.
that? Was that
Section
you spoke to?
3A.
Thank you.
Section here on what you're looking at on the screen.
Thank you. I didn't catch that when you were talking.
And the only other change that's shown as black-lined is in the definition of project, and it's just to cross-reference the description that was already in the ordinance in Section 3A.
Mark, show 3A, please, if you can draw it down.
There you go, right there, right there.
If you can you open up a little bit more?
It's on the next page.
It's on the next page, too. I thought it was on the second page.
Right there.
And draw it up a little bit more, so 3A is showing on the next page as well. There you go.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you.
That's the part.
Correct.
Do you mind if I go over?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have a microphone for her, please? Handheld. we'll get you a mic.
Or do you want a laser pointer?
Either way works.
Laser pointer or a microphone, guys?
Or I could just, I mean, it's just the end of the. Thank you. Is this working?
Yes. Pull up your mouth.
So the added language in this section 3A is we added the parenthetical together the project, and then after we added the language, the city hereby finds the project, we finance the bonds, constitutes a system or plan of additions or betterments to, yeah, you bet. Oh, thank you. Or extensions to the system. This is just language right out of
The top button, Deanna.
state law.
The very top button.
Oh, the red one. There we go. That's perfect. Okay. And just tying again the projects all together, and then memorializing that the cost of the plans and additions, of course, which is a reference to the CIP of the city, is expected to be at least the amount of the bonds proposed to be issued, as well as which is expected to be financed from proceeds of the bonds and other funds of the city, knowing that the CIP is actually significantly larger than the 35.6. And then we added, again, this last sentence here, which again is essentially right out of the federal tax certificate that the city would regularly sign in the ordinary course. But we decided, we thought it would be prudent to put it into the ordinance as well to memorialize the expectation and the covenant to proceed with due diligence with the projects and to spend, and that the city has a reasonable expectation to spend at least 85% of the net sale proceeds of the bonds within 3 years of the date of issuance. And so again, this is just to close the loop. These are the typical covenants that the city would make in connection at the time of issuance, but we wanted to add it to the ordinance if, at least for your consideration, to address some of the comments that have been received earlier.
Mayor? Yes, Councilor Mayhew.
I have two questions. I just want to clarify something with our attorney, but first I just want to be clear because as to when this became available publicly for people to see. It is on Friday we received an email, and shortly after that email I checked the website and believed I saw this attached on the website, and correct. That's been the case since Friday.
That is correct. It was uploaded by Ms. Berry at shortly after 4 o'clock on Friday.
That's what I thought. Okay. And then my question is that the point of this 3A that we're focusing on here is there was some concern as we've gone through considering this about the specific projects that we might go through and use these funds on. And so there was some concern about some movement that's happened over the last year in the prioritization of the projects. And so the outcome of that discussion was, as I understand it, is that we're not bonding specific projects. We're bonding bonding like a verb. We're issuing a bond to pay for any of the projects that are currently in our $55 million plan that we are going to complete over the next 3-year period. And so those projects may have moved since the CIP was passed. They may in fact move over the 3 years. We would just need to be confident that 30 million of that 55 million plan is going to be spent within 3 years. And I just want to make sure that or 85% of it, of that amount. And I just want to be clear that that's what this is all about, is just being clear that it's not specific projects, it's projects within our utility CIP up to the amount of this bond. Is that correct?
I have a couple comments to make to your question. The first is that the 30, I think you mentioned 35 million or 30 million.
I mentioned 30. Yeah.
And after the line of credit is paid off, there will be a significantly 25-ish million in authorization still remaining. The 35.6 is a not to exceed principal amount. This does not automatically authorize or doesn't automatically issue $35.6 million worth of bonds. Your finance team and your financial advisor and bond counsel will, of course, get together and move forward if the council decides to approve this ordinance tonight and move forward with this series of bonds that are actually issued under this ordinance. The projects, you are correct that the projects as defined in the ordinance as part of this authorization is general to include all of the projects, the capital projects that are outlined in the city's capital improvement plan as it can be amended.
Utilities capital plan.
Utilities,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry, yes, of course. This is all regard to the utilities program. From a practical perspective, in the tax documents and the other documents that are delivered at closing of the bond issue, we will ask the city to, and this is all being delegated to your finance director and to your mayor, to articulate which projects are expected to be financed with the proceeds of the bonds. Knowing that it can be changed as long as it fits within the four corners of this authorization. So at one point in time, we will take a snapshot of what the expectation is with regard to those projects. And that one point in time will be the date of issuance. But for this authorization purpose, yes, you are absolutely correct that this does not pinpoint specific projects. It does leave it open to finance a variety of projects.
Councilmember Mayhew, and then.
So
I'm sorry, no, I meant Councilmember Lassay. And then I'll go to Sunwall, and then Jim, back to you if no one else wants to speak. I want to do a little round robin and share the.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up on Councilmember Mayhew's comment regarding the projects. The projects were significantly reviewed in the Parks and Public Works Committee. I myself made several requests for changes and updates and clarifications, and so the council has copies of the list of projects, and don't pay too close attention to the numbers and where those numbers are, because they will fluctuate in terms of some are budgets, some are bids, some are not, some are projections, those sorts of things. But the purpose of this was to go through and determine that we were significantly accurate in estimating the projects and when they would occur, that they would occur during the window at which this bond issuance was addressing, and that we would meet the 85% number through the course of doing the projects that we have. So I just wanted to add that for clarification, and that information is available to you.
Councilmember Sunwall, I had the city administrator asking to speak. His hand was up before you. I'm going to go to him in the back.
I would just like to clarify or supplement Councilmember Mayhew's comment from earlier when he mentioned we expect to spend the proceeds within 3 years of issuance. I believe you also are aware, or at least council should be aware, that some of those monies came through the bond anticipation note. So there have been projects that were already paid for, if you will, and they'll be included in this bond. I want to make sure that in case anybody's wondering about the other monies that are out there and the projects.
Councilmember Sunwall.
So 3 weeks ago, when we last addressed this in council, we talked about what I'll call the Brian number, which was a smaller number, and then we had a higher number, which is the Jim number. And I'm in favor of the higher number, but something you said piqued my interest. So when we go to bond issuance in June or July or whatever, assuming we approve this tonight, you indicated that we do not have to purchase all $35 million worth of bonds. So my question is one of the reasons that I am on board with the higher number is simply the interest rate discussion that we had. And so my concern would be if we don't, I would assume if we don't buy all of the $35 million in bonds this summer, and we wait on some of them, those ones we wait on would be subject to a potentially different interest rate? Or are we locked in?
And what I meant by that, so I'm sorry if I caused some confusion. What I meant by that is that the bond issue, when the principal amount of the bonds that are actually issued by the city later this summer, may not be in the amount of $35,600,000. It might be $34 million, and depending on how the bonds are sold, there could be premiums, so the principal amount could be less than that dollar amount right there. Your financial advisor, I'm sure, would be happy to talk to you about how he expects these bonds to be sold, whether they're sold at premium bonds or discount bonds. But at the end of the day, the actual dollar amount of what's issued will be determined as we get closer to the issuance.
Okay.
I don't think there's any expectation to split this bond issue into multiple series. The plan is to issue one bond issue and to move forward under one bond issue to finance the project. So you're concerned about interest rate risk for a subsequent series. That's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say is that the ordinance authorizes a not to exceed principal amount. The actual principal amount will be determined as we get closer to issuance.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Shepherd was up first, and then I'll.
Okay, so I don't really have a lot of confidence in this idea of borrowing this much money. We're still waiting for the feedback for the Clark-Newber wrap-up Phase 1, the operational advisory. I'm going through a lot of documents having to do with what we approve on our warrants, and I'm seeing a lot of discrepancies. I still am waiting to have a discussion among council about one bill that I'm very alarmed about, but it's going to require an executive session. And I really am uncomfortable when I look at all these things and I don't see a purchase order anywhere. There's no purchase order reconciliation system in the city, and I don't really have a lot of confidence in what we're spending. I have no doubt that we can spend $35 million. We can probably spend $50 million. And I don't know that I have confidence, and they don't have more than one bid for a project that costs $1.5 million. I just really have no confidence in this bond proposal.
All right. Councilmember Mayhew and Holloway, Jim, were you guys, okay.
Yeah,
Mayhew first.
I think, I think we're making a mistake as to understanding who we were just asking questions of. We're asking questions of our attorney, who's going to tell us procedurally what's going to happen and what can and can't happen with this document. And so we're getting answers that sound vague, like, well, it might be this or it might be that. The point is she's answering our question as our attorney, telling us what's possible to do with this document that we're about to approve. She's not the one that's going to determine the amount. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's going to come, as she was trying to say, from city employees and our advisor. And then as the attorney, she's going to slot that in. So I think we were asking the questions about how much. I think we were asking them to the wrong person and potentially misunderstanding the answer. Because we were getting a legal answer, not an intent answer, a legal what's possible with this document. What's possible. Yeah.
Councilmember Holloway?
I didn't say misspeak, did I?
No, you're correct. From the legal perspective, the 36.5 is, the 35.6 is the outside principal amount that can be issued under this ordinance without coming back to the council.
So we might issue that amount or some other amount, but you're not the one that will determine that. There's others. You're telling us what's possible to do with this document that's being put in front of us.
Correct. What will happen on the day of pricing is that we, as your bond council, as the city's bond council, will look to see that the final pricing results fit within Section 14 of this ordinance. And so long as they do, then they're within the delegation, the parameters that were delegated.
Okay.
Councilmember Holloway.
So to close out the discussion between the Brian number and the Jim number. So as Councilman Lassay was saying, there is a list of projects totaling some $55 million. That's been reviewed several times in council, several times in Public Works. And so far, we have not gone in and struck projects out of that as frivolous or unneeded. These are needed projects by the utilities. Further to the point, there's already $24 million worth of projects committed. Contracts out, where that bill will come due. Take into consideration that rates now are in fairly historical low. Rates are expected, they got no place to go but up from here. So they are expected to go up given the economy and other things going on. What we're really discussing is taking 4 years worth of projects and either supporting it with 2 bond issuance, one every 2 years, or to do this bond issuance at a higher price to take advantage of those lower rates.
Higher amount, not
higher
price.
amount to take. Yes, thank you. To take advantage of those lower rates. Each bond issuance will incur, as what you're seeing, you have a cost of issuance for these bonds. So there's overhead each time you're doing this, which is not insignificant. Consolidating down to 1 gets rid of that for one of the bond issuance. Okay. In the context of the city, we are currently In past, when we had some slippage in projects, we were down staff. We are currently fully staffed back up to handle the projects. Yeah, present staffs are at budget levels expected to be sufficient to handle the $30-some million worth of projects we have identified. In addition, given council direction, if we pull further stuff forward, we could go and get contract services support, okay? I will say that this does represent a level of project execution we have not done, so that should be of concern to us. This issuance does take the full amount of what we talked about, and we've seen staff do amazing things to go consolidate projects, reduce overall costs, and even get some grant stuff. So we haven't taken that into that can actually be benefit to us, that if we take advantage of that, we can roll other projects in here. Again, we've got $55 million worth of projects on the books. The line I think we're kind of talking about for this money is, this is utility revenue bonds. The projects we need to spend this on are utility projects. That's really the hard line we can't cross with this money. Okay? Can't go do resurfacing of the parkway with these funds. Out of bounds, okay? So we'll get into that. And that was pretty much the discussion we had in last council and F&A, trying to figure out which price to go with. And we settled in at the $32 million plus administration and issuance costs to get us to the 35.6. That's the recommendation you have before you tonight.
Recommendation of the committee. Yeah. Correct?
Huh?
A unanimous recommendation of the committee, correct?
Both committees.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you. Councilmember Ross and then Councilmember Jeans.
So there were three of us, three council members. We actually toured Public Works last week and looked at the different projects and saw what was in process. And these are all projects that are part of the capital improvement plan. And some of them have been completed and they are coming in under budget. And some were combined that saved a couple $1 million. And I would say that the projects are well managed. I have confidence in the managers of the Public Works. And during the tour, we were told of additional projects that are coming in that are requirements of the Department of Ecology that we will see in the next couple of years. And so this would be, I don't know, might be part of the next bond if we, based on the number of projects we already have going on. But I have confidence in the management, and I know that, and I feel that this is the correct amount that we need for the bond.
Councilmember Jeans.
Probably at the last meeting, or maybe the meeting before that, this matter was presented to us by Public Works, which identified all of the capital improvement plan Public Works projects. So I have a familiarity with that. I'm on board that these matters are all necessary. But today, or this evening before the meeting, this was issued, which is a supplement that brings current some concerns that were raised in committee. It's sort of like what you're saying, Matt. And so I would like to have somebody from Public Works to give me some confidence in what I got to learn was this matter. What refinements have been made to this that is now before us, this new document?
I don't think that's a new document. See, I don't think he's looking at a new document.
No, he's not. He's supposed to know how's involved, I think.
Mr. Mayor?
Did you do
Can I
it?
Yeah.
make a comment? while
Councilmember
we're-
Lassay.
From the Parks and Public Works Committee standpoint, we're not looking at a new document. We're looking
Yeah,
at
thank
an
you.
evolution of a document. It was been cleaned up
Or
and
hang
clarified.
on.
So
Bob, Councilmember Jeans?
Yeah.
Councilmember Lassay was speaking primarily to you, so if you could.
Sorry?
I think it's important to understand that we're not looking at a new document. We're looking at a document that has evolved over several meetings and committee meetings and council meetings, that has been asked to be, cleaned up and clarified and expanded upon from previous presentations. I'll leave it to Public Works to describe the specific enhancents, because I wouldn't really call them changes. I'd call them just clarifications and enhancements.
And actually for the lake, well, I'll go ahead, I'll let the city attorney speak.
the document that council's being asked to take action on is the bond ordinance.
Right.
And so the changes that have been made in the evolution of the bond ordinance are not based on Public Works input or specific projects. They're based on the advice of bond counsel. And the dollar amount of the not-to-exceed principal has changed in the evolution of the council committee consideration, as Ms. Gregory was describing. But there aren't specific projects in there, and so if you're asking about the evolution of the CIP or what projects, that would be a question Public Works could answer. If you're asking for Public Works input on the changes to the bond ordinance, you're probably asking the wrong person. No offense to Mr. Marcinko.
And so Councilmember Jean's to comments that Councilmember Lassay made at the beginning of this conversation. The CIP list, or this CIP list, is ever evolving. By the time this bond is executed, we'd have further revisions because, again, some are projections, some are based on real projects, some are based on estimates or bids coming back, and so and those variables are all going to change, and so we could be updating this into perpetuity. And so again, Councilmember Mayhew made the point earlier that the I think more salient concern to focus your attention on is, do the liabilities or the needs far exceed the amount of this bond? And I think the answer was definitively yes. So because the language has been written in such a way, and that was what Deanna was speaking to, there's a great deal of flexibility as those variables change to be able to move projects in or out. Councilmember Holloway spoke to that too. So we're more than happy to go through some of those changes in this most recent revision, but as Bob Sturbank noted, it isn't really directly related to the ordinance before you tonight. Did you still want to do that, or have the staff do that?
Well, from Bob Sturbank's comments and from Matt Lassay's comments, I'm okay.
Okay, great.
But we can get that at some later time.
Absolutely.
Good.
The staff would be happy to review that with you at any time.
Every committee meeting.
Any other comments, Councilmember Mayhew?
I just want to, just speaking to my fellow council members and about what's coming, I just want to focus on three things. Remember, 10 million of this has already been spent. It was covered by a bond anticipation note, which comes due soon. It comes due this year.
24 million has been contracted, so it's already 24 million.
Exactly right. Beyond the 10 that's been spent, cash out the door, which must be refinanced or somehow paid for, must be refinanced. So 10 million is to that. And as Councilmember Holloway just said, 24 million is actually already contracted. So we've committed this money. This is a question of paying for it. But I just want to make this point. By doing one issuance instead of two, which is what we're talking about here, someone earlier tonight talked about the amount of fees we pay to Pacifica Law Group. We will pay lower fees in total to Pacifica Law Group, as well as other advisors, by doing this once instead of twice. So this is squarely addressing that point and trying to keep those costs down. The second thing is, and I'd really ask to just focus on this, a significant amount of this money is paying for deferred maintenance in our utility system, particularly in the older parts of the city. And if we don't fix this now, according to this plan, these are things that are very aged. They'll fail. When they fail, we will look at ourselves and ask ourselves, if we don't approve this, what the heck were we thinking? We allowed this to fail, and the cost will be much more expensive then, plus the effects of things spewing onto the streets. We'll be dealing with all of that. So, and then the last point I just want to make, well, there's administrative issues that were raised. I think they're valid questions. And I think we should continue to look at, is the city running itself with good internal controls, and where we aren't, let's fix that. There's a discussion about purchase orders, and these are administration of how we do things. We should continue to oversee that, but we shouldn't hold up fixing these important things, is my view. Because if they break, we'll have a much bigger problem. And so doing this now, the larger bond, doing it now before interest rates go up, what we're doing is we are keeping our water bills, our utility bills lower for our residents. not by a little bit. This is a fair amount of money that we are projected to save by getting in now before interest rates go up more and doing another bond if we split this into two. So what we're doing here is doing necessary projects responsibly and saving our ratepayers money by doing it in this way. And so I just want to focus on those key issues as we make our vote.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that when we voted in a capital improvement plan, then we authorize spending whether we have the money to pay for it or not. Is that right?
No, the capital improvement plan is just that, it's a plan. The council authorizes the spending of money either through an instrument like this, the ordinance that authorizes the sale of bonds, or by adoption of the biennial budget, which appropriates money and provides authorization for the administration to spend it.
Well, wait.
But the plan itself does not authorize expenditures.
Correct. The CIP is intent.
Councilmember Holloway.
Thank you, sorry. It was just.
Right.
The CIP was intent. The issuance of this bond does not authorize individual projects.
Correct.
It authorizes the action to get money on loan. Pure and simple. The projects are then authorized individually by contract.
I was trying to answer Councilmember Shepherd about spending money. When you authorize debt, you're authorizing spending money to pay back the principal and interest. You're correct, though, that this does not. Correct. The projects themselves are separate, and those, the award of the construction contracts for the projects that are not already underway will come to the council in due course.
So I'm going to try and do round robin. I'll go to Councilmember Lissay and then back to you, Councilmember Shepherd.
I just want to make sure we're clear with everyone listening on the amount of dollars that are included currently and the amount of dollars that are allocated already. And maybe that means, Dan, either you or Brian or somebody can clarify this. Am I getting my people wrong? On the paperwork here, I think it's clear that there is a CIP budget line. And again, I wouldn't look at the totals per se, but there's a CIP budget line and there's a bid line. The bid lines are locked-in numbers that we have allocated through agenda bills and/or ordinances and/or contract awards.
Correct.
That put us in a position where we have outstanding obligations. That totals up on this chart to $19 million. Now, there's an additional $5 million that has been already awarded, completed, and allocated through the $10 million line of credit. So that's where we get our $24 million number. And I just want to clarify that that is accurate in a round numbers sense, and I'm getting a nod in the head. So it's not that we've spent $10 million and we have another $24 million allocated. We have a $24 million obligation that we've awarded through contracts and through entities to create these projects. This bond issuance then pays for those things and covers those things, and for the additional projects as they come forward, which will fluctuate in both budget and cost.
And important to know, along with the CIP plan, was also the rate study plan that corresponded with that projected what kind of revenue rates would need to be charged in order for the council to have the ability to go get a bond to pay for those projects that are committed to. So, Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so I know that the CIP was approved last year, and I've heard Rob say that the line of credit is drawn down as of the end of May. And so it tells me that we have already committed to spending more than we have. But when we approved the CIP, we did not approve the bond debt. So we approved spending, but when we didn't have money just to pay for it. Is that right?
No, it's.
Are we in the middle of?
Councilmember May, you want to speak to that, or?
Seeing if this helps, my understanding of it, that is kind of, the CIP lays out the projects we intend to do over the next 6 years. It's a 6-year plan. So we're into that 6 years, but it's a 6-year plan of what we need to do. That doesn't authorize anything, not a single thing. What then happens is we pass our biennial budget, and in that budget is capital spending. And what usually happens is, with some adjustments perhaps to update time, but that those CIP broadly for the next biennium, that amount is brought into our budget. And so we budget it sort of 2 years at a time. But that still doesn't authorize any individual spending. What then happens is the projects that we've now approved a budget for those 2 years, and potentially projects that are outside of the 2 years, or that begin within the 2 years and maybe end without, those individual projects come forward to us as a council through our committees. We then approve those. That's when the money's committed to be spent. Although, as I understand it, City Attorney, hopefully correct me if I'm wrong, we include clauses in those contracts that say if we don't have, if we don't budget money to pay for that project, there's actually a clause that allows us to then withdraw from the contract. That would be very unfortunate for us. We would have spent a certain amount of money, then we'd close down the contract if we didn't fund it. But so from an understanding of what have we actually authorized to spend, it's the specific projects that we've approved as a council, which generally match up to the biennium, and then to the extent that any projects get approved by us that include spending beyond what we approved in that biennial budget, then what happens is that gets caught up during the year. We go back and we revisit the budget and we true it up to add in those specific projects. So we get the budget trued up to what the individual projects that we've approved. So we're not approving the whole CIP. We do approve the CIP. That doesn't authorize anything to be spent. It's the budgeting each biennium that says that where we actually appropriate that money to be spent, and then it then gets actually spent, or we actually approve it to be spent when we approve the individual projects. That's my understanding. I don't know if that helps or not, but is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, because otherwise it's hard for us to have direction to go chase revenue and do a bond, and then after the fact say, hey, should you approve a project to use this money for? So it's
So just the one last point I'd make on that is, so when we think about this, how does all that relate to this bond? It relates in two ways. There's projects that we've approved that we need this funding to pay for. And then we're about to do a budget for the next biennium. We're going to bring those CIP projects that we plan to spend on in the next 2 years, and we need to have the money to pay for those. Otherwise, we won't be able to approve any more projects.
I did want to note, I should have noted at the beginning of the meeting that we have about close to an hour's worth of items in executive session tonight, so just keep that in mind. Councilmember Sunwell.
On that note, I think it's pretty clear where the direction of the council's leaning, and so I would make a motion to end debate, because I suspect you're also going to ask for public comment, and that could go for a few minutes. So that would be my motion.
So you want to clarify to end debate, but leave it open for public comment?
End debate amongst the council.
We'll figure out the right way to do that in the future, but I think that's clearly understood. All those in favor of ending debate?
Was it seconded?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, you were about to do that.
Was that a second, Jim?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay. The ayes have it, so the debate is over, and I'll, no,
Oh, wait, clarification though.
Oh.
Do we need to make a motion to substitute? the
Oh,
alternate?
yes, thank you, Brian. I was in back of my mind, I've been reminding myself, make sure to put the substitute motion on it. That's a huge problem, so we need to pull, if we could, pull back that motion.
Okay.
We've been debating the substitute motion, but we never put the substitute on the table. So I assume you want to get the substitute on the table,
Yes,
Councilmember
so I will
Summerall?
move to put the substitute.
Or just make a motion to substitute, what do we call it, Bob? Help him with the language.
Final bond ordinance revised as of May 11th, 2018.
What he said.
Second.
All right, have a motion, a second, as stated by
It's his number, give it to him.
Councilmember Sunwall affirming the city attorney. All right. Is there any further discussion? No, you might want to make a motion, Councilmember Sunwall.
I make a motion to end debate amongst council on this matter.
All right, there's been a motion to
Second.
end, motion and a second to end debate. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Still the ayes have it, so this time we're going to open it to any public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Mayhew, Losay, and Shepherd.
I'm not convinced that we need this bond. It's been noted in the media that Roger McCollum spent $1 million trying to prove that we needed the hospital that's now sitting in debt up on the hill. Spent $1 million trying to prove we needed that hospital. I'm not convinced. I don't know of one person in this valley who's had their baby there or who's gone there for a surgery. As a citizen, I feel that this should be billed directly to the developer. That's a simple solution. I'm also curious where these bonds are coming from. Do any of them include EB-5 visas? Another important thought, we don't know that we need any of this. It hasn't been proven.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Becky?
Oh, gosh, well, I feel like David Blaine's in the house, a master illusionist, and numbers change and documents go missing, and the fluff is really pretty when the flower's in bloom, but people forget the roots of the thing, and I'm really seriously concerned about the citizens trusting anything anyone says. Numbers change, numbers go. The characters that have played a part in some of this development, and I don't want to mention last names, but, you know, when Darrell Wright was here, and, you know, we don't even know who we can trust anymore. I think we should give it to the feds and have them work it out, and have American Greed come and film the whole process in the making.
Thank you, Becky. Monica?
I'm going to start with a question. How are you going to budget money to pay for this $55 million project? I understand we can borrow money. I understand the CIP. I understand it's needed, although I would agree, I don't know how proven it is to completely redo the entire downtown, but we do need to definitely improve our infrastructure that's aging. However, there's no talk about expansion. I haven't heard that word once tonight. And we're not discussing the Salish expansion. We're not discussing the mill site expansion, who will both benefit tremendously from this project. I want to know what they're paying, and I've been at several meetings asking this question, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. So I'm assuming nothing. It's basically going to be hookup fees for them, and citizens are going to be shouldered with the burden of paying $55 million. I would also like to say $7 million is the largest bond that the city has ever borrowed, and we're talking about $55 million when I'm surprised Dan Marcinko isn't up here explaining and answering these questions. I don't think our city staff even fully understands how they're going to manage this project. I do like how James pointed out we needed to add some additional employees to oversee this. Peggy mentioned POs. Are we going to use Pertite, who we know charges triple, and the city doesn't get secondary, quotes? They just kind of write a check and nothing else is said about it. Citizens really don't trust the management and handling of this large amount of money without seeing some actual facts of how you're going to manage this project and how it's going to be paid for, which is clear. It's going to be raising utility bills on citizens. It's going to be raising property taxes on citizens. Yes, it may prevent a nightmare from happening, possibly, but it's going to have to be paid through people that live in this very great city.
Right,
and I
you,
think
Monica.
there needs to be more dialogue and
Thank you, Monica.
an open meeting.
Anna?
Anna Sotelo, 7713 Center Boulevard, Southeast. I wasn't going to say anything, but I guess I just want to reassure some people because I have gone to every single committee meeting, every single one, finance, every single one. And I've heard just the whole vetting of it. And I guess my summary is that, like Sean said a few weeks ago, we kicked the can too long, and we have to do these projects. Where Becky and other people's concerns, I think, of the trust issue, I think that comes in with the policies and everything that's happened and everything. I feel we've just spent an hour on something that is just to confirm that this council is doing their due diligence. The numbers that have changed, it's not exactly smoke and mirrors, Becky. It's that soft costs and things like that never got accounted for, and it was but I think that we are moving in the right direction of transparency. I would like the city administration to really take note of the few things that they have said in the trust, and it is hard to trust. and that whole traits thing that was kind of going around last year, it really needs to be taken seriously. And I think that you need to rebuild the trust in the citizens. This money needs to be spent. It does need to be spent. They'll spend it. These projects have been put off too long. There's no room for anything to happen cockamamie any longer because they are watching it. So I guess as someone that has been watching this whole process, it does get vetted out in a very different situation than tonight. So if that makes any citizens feel better, but again, I would like the administration to hear the concerns of the citizen and why they feel this way.
Thank you, Anna. Are there any other folks that want to comment prior to action tonight? All right, seeing no one else come forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion is carried. Thank you, council. Give me 1 sec.
Is that the amendment or was that the whole?
Yeah, point of order?
Yes, sir.
Was that last vote on the
substitute.
Substitute?
Yes.
We already voted on that, yeah.
So I guess we got to come back to the original motion.
Right.
And, yeah, and are we
so
now at the
now-
original motion?
All right, so now back to the original motion. I assume no further debate, so all those in favor on the original motion?
Point of order, could you clarify what we're about to
Well, the original motion was basically carrying forward the ordinance you've been looking at for a month and a half or 2 months now. And tonight, a substitute ordinance was put,
That was the last vote, was to put the substitute ordinance in.
yeah.
So now
Well, I
we're
thought a
voting
substitute
on
was
passing that
versus
substitute
a-
ordinance.
Which includes the actual amount.
Yeah, basically the original motion with
And
the
these other
substitute
changes, right.
is part of it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in favor of the original motion with the substitute?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. All right. Dan, did you have something?
Why is Dan
No,
here?
I just wanted to thank council for going through. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize my staff. Todd Saxberg, Brian Kraus, the two ops managers, Brian Coleman's here. All the guys actually worked very hard putting this together, working with the committees and getting this through. Everybody knows I'm a spreadsheet person, so working with them and accommodating what we're looking for. And then Drew Boutte did a tremendous job at working with my staff and coordinating those efforts together. Greatly appreciate it. I do look, as Councilmember Lissay and Sunwall were saying, monthly reports. You guys will be getting the updates so you know exactly what we're spending, where it's going, and how it's being drawn down, and where it's being accounted for. So, but thank you.
Great, thank you, Dan. Councilmember Holloway?
I know you're going to scold me later, but couple of points. One, the $24 million was actually $28 million worth of project that they did an excellent job of optimizing down by that figure.
To 24, yeah.
Yeah, so good job, you guys. Although it doesn't sound like you're appreciated, you are. Okay? On the public comments, for those who wish to come up here and continue to campaign for office, you ought to do it from a seat of knowledge. So let me help with some of that. The hospital district is a separate government entity. The city does not do hospital business.
Councilmember Holloway, I'm going to do a point of order. This isn't really relevant to anything on the agenda, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask that you.
Statements of factually incorrectness.
I understand. It might be uncomfortable, but that's our job to just,
I told you
people are
we're
free to
gonna
say
scold
what they want to say, so, yeah.
All right.
Okay. I do want to say before we move on, just a big thank you to Councilmembers Jeans and Ross for taking up on going out on the tour to look at those projects. That invitation is always open, and regardless of this being approved tonight, there's still lots coming, so.
Mayor, there was others too.
Oh, that's right, Jim came on a little late. Well, you missed a bunch. You got to get back on and do the early parts. You missed those, Jim.
Mayor, I also believe there's one other councilor that went. Was there not?
No, Peggy, or,
You didn't go, okay. Oh,
but again, I think still worthwhile for you to go out and check out those projects, and there's more coming, so.
I wasn't.
Yeah. Jim, I think, got to see the reservoir and kind of at the end of it, but you missed the big stuff. All right, great. Yeah, big milestone for the staff. Thank you, council. That was a very good due diligence on that, and big milestone forward. All right, with that, we'll move on to,
Next item, AB 40.
you want a break? A break?
Okay.
All right. We're not quite coming at 10 o'clock, council, but maybe this is a good time for a short break before we move on. When we do like a
No.
4-minute break,
Why?
No.
we'll reconvene at 8:32.
Okay.
Since when do we take breaks?
I know.
You know, the
Meeting is now back in session. Moving down to, under Committee of the Whole, we have Agenda Bill 18040, ordinance amending Chapter 2.36 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code related to salaries, establishing a salary commission and providing for severability and effective date. This is for elected officials. This was introduced on 3/12 and is ready for action tonight. So if you could just,
Who did this one?
I'm sorry?
I am? Okay.
So if you just read the motion, please.
Motion. Move to adopt ordinance
Whoops, sorry.
1202.
1202.
1202, amending Chapter 2.36 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code related to salaries, establishing a salary commission, and providing for severability and an effective date. Elected officials. May I have a second?
Second.
Now, motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1202 as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Any discussion? Councilmember Mayhew.
Move to amend the proposed ordinance with the changes in the document that's attached called alternate ordinance dash with changes highlighted. These changes have been discussed with administration. I believe they're agreed to by the administration and the F&A Council Committee members and are intended to, one, clarify in the opening why this is proposed, two, to synchronize the committee's activities with the biennial budget cycle, and three, to permit the committee that would be established to specify implementation dates consistent with the budget cycle if it so chooses.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second as stated by Councilmember Holloway, and Jody's going to need a copy of that to capture it in the minutes.
It's attached already.
Of the motion he just made?
Oh.
Okay.
Alternate is attached.
All right. All right, and Jim, thank you for quickly putting that on the table. So, discussion on substituting.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lassay.
I respect the efforts that Councilmember Mayhew has gone through. However, I think it's important to note that by making these changes, we are no longer following the RCW. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but we are changing verbiage that is directly related to RCW section noted and not, so by inference, not following it any longer, and therefore taking on some, I have concerns that we are taking on something that all we're trying to do is establish a salary commission, and we're now trying to tell the salary commission what to do. And I have concerns about that. I think the whole intent here is to let that salary commission work independently, let that salary commission make the decisions it chooses to make, should they be favorable or not favorable, and stay out of that business. And with that, I don't think we should be doing that. I think we are treading on thin ice by making changes to something that the state has authorized that cities can undertake.
So, if I may, with respect to comparing this to state law, there were some possible changes discussed several meetings ago where there were some issues about what the statute said versus what the proposed changes were, and those changes are no longer being included in what Councilmember Mayhew has proposed. The only difference here from where we were is to change the interval at which the commission will act from 3 years to 2 years.
Or Bob, perhaps I could do a quick clarification. You're
Sorry.
speaking about the language in the whereas is leading up to the
I'm
ordinance.
even speaking to the language in the actual ordinance itself.
Okay, I'm
as
sorry.
well.
Right, and I'm just wondering whether you may be thinking of the previous version, because then the only other, aside from the interval, the only other changes being made is asking that when the commission makes its decision and files it with the clerk, which is what the statute provides for, that the commission should indicate the effective date of that, because it is the commission's action. Once they file it with the clerk, it becomes effective as provided. The city doesn't direct that, and so the ordinance is just asking the commission to make that clear.
Understandable. Then I want to, as a follow-up, I've only been on council for roughly 4 months, but we're looking at now version 5 of something that this should have been a simple follow the rules and issue. I'm just trying to understand why modifying something that the state has available to cities is necessary to modify by us. I don't understand why we would want to get into the issue of this and why we want to make changes that, haven't been seen by a majority of this council on the spot in a council meeting without really understanding what's in there. I'm just expressing that to the council.
Point of order, Mayor. Could we have order in the room, please?
I'm sorry, what?
Could we have order in the room, please?
There's a lot of chirping, I think is
Yeah,
what he's saying.
if we could just, there's the little comments and words and so forth being made in the audience. I've asked the audience to please be respectful of the decorum of the chamber and refrain from making the little comments or noises and so forth. All right, thank you. A clarification, it's my understanding, Bob, there isn't like an off-the-shelf ordinance that's a one-size-fits-all. Every community's, but, you know, we've looked at other samples, and every community's kind of modified this a little bit for their own purposes. Is that correct? I mean,
The statute provides for most of, but not all, what has appeared in other jurisdictions' ordinance. We started by essentially borrowing North Bend's and working from there. I guess the concern that Councilmember Lassay expressed would probably be better addressed by the maker of the motion as to why included or not.
Councilor Mayhew, and then Sunwell.
So I would just comment, my understanding is that this ordinance was modeled after North Bend's, possibly looking at some others, I don't recall, but that was what was brought forward by the administration initially. I do respect the point that was made that some of the concerns that I had earlier on were ultimately I've withdrawn those concerns. I will tell you that every change that's here is a change that you will find in either the City of Kirkland's ordinance or the City of Redmond's ordinance. None of this was drafted by me. I went out and looked to see if the concerns I had, how those had been addressed. Also keeping in mind the advice we received from the city attorney. So these are not things that we're breaking ground on. It's really different cities have implemented this differently, and it's a question of which sort of model we want to follow. And I would just finally say all of these changes are either to try and get the timing to match up with our budget cycle, or to give some additional, to clarify some additional power to the commission. Not some additional restriction, some additional power. It gives them the power to say, implement a raise or a reduction now, implement it in the next budget cycle, lets them choose an implementation date. It just gives them more power.
Councilmember Sunwell.
Withdraw at this point.
Councilmember Say.
I just want to follow up then. The areas, I'll be more specific because I think it's important that we speak to the issues at hand. I have concern in two areas. One, the salary commission membership, so item B under 2.36.040. We're asking the members of the commission to serve for a 3-month term, which will commence with the last commission member's appointment. Okay, the previous language was first 1 year, and then a 6-month, and now a 3-month term. Below that, then, under the commission duties on A, so 2.36.050, it says the commission shall meet between July 1st and September 30th to take review and action. Well, one, can we be certain that based upon the dates that it says that it will commence once the last of the 3 commission members are appointed, can they be appointed by July 1st? And two, is that reasonable that they can do their duties within 3 months when the normal term, as stated in originally, was 1 year? And are we creating ourselves a conundrum in that they have to be appointed and they have to accept? Then they have to do the duties within 3 months, and if they don't, then what? There's no, it puts us in limbo. And so I'm concerned that we've restricted this to a point of there's no way out of it if we can't get them appointed and they can't do their job. And that's really primarily where I'm focusing on. So I'd welcome suggestions how to rectify that.
If there's no one else wishes to speak, I'll come back. Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so I really don't like the idea of us working on this agenda bill at this point. We don't have a budget for 2 years. We've not allowed public engagement to be involved as far as bringing together a biennial budget. We have so many things that are just a much higher priority than this. And I've watched, you know, committee members spend hours on this bill. And honestly, I really think it needs to be put at the bottom, put on the parking lot. And we need to get on to business that's more important.
Councilmember Summerall.
I would suggest it's been put on the back burner for 18 years. So that's a long burner. I couldn't care less what I get paid, but I do think that revisiting, you know, as it says in here, our city was 15% the size it is now. I don't know, I didn't go to meetings 15 years ago, but I suggest they might be 15% in length as then as they are now. I think one of the things that we have to be cognizant of is setting up a system so that those who will come after us, this is a lot of work. I think most of us, certainly we don't do it for the pay, because the pay is squat. I think we do it for the love of the city and wanting to be engaged in the process. But I would also suggest that there is a time commitment that's set aside by most to do this, and I think we need to make sure that we are compensating. There's no way to compensate people on an hourly basis that would even come close to minimum wage. But I do think it's reasonable to make sure that our city, just like it's competitive and it's tries to be competitive in its wages with police officers and firefighters and CFOs and every other staff member we can think of, I do believe we owe our citizens at least having this be held every 2 years, as has been articulated, so that council members are being compensated in a way that's in accordance with their peers. And I do believe that will help. Again, no one's going to take this job 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 years from now because of the pay. But I do think it does help justify a little bit the time that they will take from family, from work, and from other activities to do this. And the commission might come back and say nothing, that we're fine where we are. Great, right? But who are we to say we are or we aren't? And that's why this RCW, I think, is put into place. And so we talk about citizen engagement. Well, here's a commission that gets to engage, right? And tell the city what its 7 representatives should or shouldn't make. And then we live with it.
Actually, 8. Councilmember Ross.
To Councilmember Desai.
Councilmember Ross, if you could speak into the microphone, please.
To Councilmember Desai's point about is being too specific on the 3-month and between July 1st and September 30th. If you go back and look at 2.36030, where it allows members shall be appointed as provided once every 2 years on or about July 1st. The commission may be filled or appointed at any time in the interim as directed by the city council by resolution. So I think that takes care of your very specific comments on that.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, to just try and respond, I was sort of surprised by the 3-month term too, but you know, the city of Kirkland gives a 3-month term, a much larger city than we are. And this is an ordinance that's been in place for a while for them. So I thought, oh, it turns out that cities much bigger than us get this done in that sort of time frame. And so I guess I get a little, first off, I just want to say, with respect to the budget, as required by law, I participated in the mid-year budget, but as required by law, there are public hearings, and this has been, our budget has been adopted as it's required to be by law. So I don't understand comments to the contrary. But the point here of this whole ordinance is, right now, the city council decides what the mayor's salary is. We change it as we please. Right now, the city council decides what the city council's salary is. This is about saying, no, let's give this out, let's get it out of the city council's realm. Let's give this to a citizen committee which will operate in public meetings. And I would think that a lot of the concerns I hear about transparency, public involvement, this is all about meeting those. So You know, and then just to the specific points, I was going to make the point that Councilmember Ross made about the duration. It's not limiting. It's and if Redmond and Kirkland are getting this done in 3 months, I would think we could as well. So it seemed reasonable, and as pointed out, it can be extended. It can be you know, just called again to meet again. That's all my comment.
Councilmember Lassay and then Sunwell.
Thank you for the clarifications. I'm still feel that we're probably pushing the envelope a little too much in terms of making the modifications. I'm not opposed to a salary commission. I'm not opposed to doing our due diligence and assessing for, not just for us, but for future council members and mayors to have a plan in place to take care of this that is outside of the council's purview. I think that's the appropriate way to do it. The salary setting should be done by an independent group. It shouldn't be done by legislatures, and I certainly would wish that our federal legislators would take the same tact. That being said, again, I want to just point out that it's not an objection to the idea of an ordinance for this. It's that we're being too specific in some of the areas to adjusting what was previously there.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So this doesn't happen very often, but I believe Councilmember Mayhew may have either misstated or been mistaken about who sets the salaries for city council members. I believe I heard him say that we do. I believe that's incorrect. The salary we have now, did I hear you wrong, Jim?
No, but I am correct.
Yeah, we do.
My understanding is that it.
No, you do. Right now,
You have
currently.
restrictions how you do it, but we do.
Right. The authority rests with the council. There are restrictions on when any increase.
But it can't happen before an election. It has to happen
I knew you
after
had a
an
nuance
election.
there, yeah. Then.
Yes.
Right.
We could adopt one tonight,
But you
and it
could-
would not take effect until after an election.
Right. Yeah, you couldn't.
With staggered according to position.
Correct.
But correct, yes. But as far as what entity or what body has the
Okay.
authority to set the
I
salary,
understand.
for both council members and the mayor, that authority rests with the council.
Got it. Thank you. Dang it. Wipe that smirk off your face.
You were kind of right.
No.
Right at all. Well, the clarification, he was right insofar as you can't collect the change right away. All right. Any further discussion? Councilmember Jeans.
So I'm sure it's well before I came onto the council and Brian came onto the council. This hasn't been looked at, this matter of the compensation for the council for decades. And it doesn't hurt to look at it. And it would be fine, especially if it's looked at by an independent source and there's a public involvement in that. And I think the idea of a 3-month period of time is, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Let's just get these people in, do their research, make their recommendations to the council. And actually, if they make their recommendation that we should get a salary increase, it's our decision as to whether we're going to, this commission, what, you're giving me these notes. The commission will actually establish.
Deal.
Okay.
We have no say.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll ask if there's.
What are we voting on?
No, I'm asking if there's any members of the public to comment. We're voting on the substitute, then we'll have to come back to the original motion after we come. Okay. All right. So if there's no further discussion, is there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Monica?
I know that there's no dialogue here, but, and I know that I missed the last couple meetings, but while I was attending them regularly, I thought there was discussion about approving $30,000 to make this analysis more formal. I'm just curious, was I missing something? Or I know that there's no, yes, I'm missing something, or yes, did we spend $30,000 to hire an agency
Can I just
to?
clarify that?
Yeah, go ahead.
That was actually, we hired a consultant, Ralph Anderson, to conduct a salary and benefits survey for the management professional
For
employees.
staff.
Oh, just for staff, not for
different-
mayor
different
and
compensation levels.
council. Okay.
Right.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Any other members of the public like to comment prior to action? All right, seeing no one else move forward, all those in favor?
Point of order.
Aye.
Point of order.
This is on the
Yes.
amended, this is on the amended? Or the substitution, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
I'm sorry, Matt, did you vote
That
no?
was a no.
Okay. And now back to the original motion. I assume there's no further debate on that, so all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, one nay on that. Okay, with that, we move on to, give me a second here, figure out where I am. Down under reports, I want to first, before I forget, to do a special call out to Rob Orton, our interim finance officer, who came back out of a peaceful, relaxed environment into a situation that was a little contentious and riled up following a very active election season, and jumped right in and helped us kind of pull through this transition here. And Rob, I know I'm speaking on behalf of the council and all the staff when I just say we're so deeply appreciate your willingness to come back in and enjoy so much of the fun all over again. So again, wish you joy and fun getting back to your grandkids and back to retirement. But again, we're so appreciative. Thank you so much. All right. Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 18-0.
We,
That
move
was
this.
pulled. Yeah. Any other report for Parks and Public Works Committee?
None.
You guys have had your fair share of the platform.
We're not
tonight.
done.
Yeah. Community Development Committee report.
No report, although there will be a discussion about the Snoqualmie Sister Cities.
Bob, why don't you go ahead and cue it up now, since it's appropriately coming out of that committee?
It's okay now?
Sure.
You'll recall at our last council meeting, the public raised issues about Snoqualmie Sister Cities Association. The council was wondering about our sister cities, and the council decided that we need to look further into that. And the council decided that it would be assigned to the Community Development Committee. And so we took that on last Monday night at our regularly scheduled meeting, although it was not a regular meeting because we took on no other items as a matter of discussion. We just exclusively dedicated our time to having a better understanding of the Snoqualmie Sister Cities Association. We first heard from the city attorney with respect to the staff's position relative to sister cities. And I would summarize the staff, or the city attorney saying, sister cities is a totally separate entity. It's a 501c3, not related to the city, not financed by the city. No one from the Sister Cities Association reports to anybody within the city with respect to the activities, any of the activities of the Sister Cities Association of Snoqualmie. We then heard public comment from citizens. We heard from the Sister Cities president. We heard from their treasurer. We had an email from a former board member, and that was made a part of the record.
And former treasurer.
Okay. Peggy Shepard did a very professional presentation about her views of sister cities. We heard from other citizens. After hearing from all citizens and all city people and from the Sister Cities Association, we sort of said to ourselves, well, what do we do now? Or why were we asked to look into this? I think it's fair to say the committee concluded, the three members of the committee who discussed it and concluded that should we take action? We concluded that we should not. We contemplated whether we should monitor the sister cities, and I think it's fair to say we thought monitoring the sister cities is a good idea. The Snoqualmie Sister Cities Association is going on sort of a moratorium. They're not doing any of the exchanges right now. They're not doing really any activities of their organization. They're trying to regroup with some board members who have retired. And so the recommendation is that we do nothing because we should do nothing. They're not ours, and they're not ours to say about how they're doing, but we should continue to monitor it on the basis of we are affiliated with the sister cities. I mean, with the cities of Ganjin and Chaclacayo, and we will. I think we should continue to look at that. We should look at what kinds of things they're doing internally. They talked about them deciding to do a bit of a financial assessment, independent financial assessment. I think they called it an audit, although I'm wondering whether an audit would do it, but in any event, some independent look, but that's their decision. That's pretty much it. And so I'm recommending the committee, are recommending that we take no action and that we monitor the activities of sister cities. Jim and Matt?
Well, I think I was clear in my conversation that I would like to hear from other council members as well. I do agree with the statement and summary you've made that the monitoring is a vital part of that. How that happens is really independent of, we can't really create a plan to monitor something that we don't have authority or jurisdiction over. But I'll step back, and I would like to hear from other council members, as I stated in that committee meeting.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So one of the things that came to my awareness is as I had brought to the story about one mother's difficult experience in Chaclacayo, her daughter being in Chaclacayo, is one person said to me, what exactly happened? How loud was it? Was the door closed or was the door open? Another member said, where is the person? Why didn't they show up? And when you're talking about things that have to do with sexual abuse, you're not going to have people show up, and you're probably going to have people show up 4 years after the fact. This event happened in 2014, and it's now 2018. So it's not going to happen instantly, and you're not going to have somebody stand up and say, here I am, and this is what happened. It's a very humiliating experience. So that's one thing that I think we need to learn as a city, how to be more sensitive about when things happen in that vein. And as far as the recount of the experience coming from Mary Corcoran, I had heard the bits that I didn't share of that story. I had also heard from that story, but I chose not to share those aspects in order to maintain as much anonymity as possible for the people involved. But one of the things that her recounting of that trip was that basically she validated the things that I had heard, but I hadn't shared. So I think that I still feel that it's not a safe place to go. Chaclacayo isn't. And I feel that the organization represents our city, And I think that for those students to go down to an area where we have travel advisories that say that Lima is a critical place to be visiting, and a lot of other warnings as far as how dangerous that area of the world is. I do not agree with what the other council members feel as far as we should be okay with sending our high school students to dangerous parts of the world. I just don't agree, and I really think that the parents need to be made aware. And I don't understand why we have to have an association with an organization when we don't have any visibility into what's going on. And they do bring money in and out of our accounts, whether it's coming to the city as money that comes to the city, but it still flows. There's still money that flows through our accounts. There is a connection, a financial connection. And as far as all the rest of it, I think that if you look at the city of Seattle has 22 sister cities, and they have somebody who organizes that.
Councilmember Shepherd, to cut you short, I'm going to defer to the chair of the committee. I don't think the intention was to relitigate or rediscuss. I want to defer to a majority of the council members tonight. Again, they spent an entire hour on this issue back at committee level. They heard all the evidence presented. They came back with a recommendation with council. If there's a desire and a feeling that that was not thoroughly vetted and covered, I'm sure the council would be comfortable to send that back for further discussion at committee level. We have an hour of executive session time later here tonight in addition to remaining issues. Council, if you want to continue to entertain Councilmember Shepherd delve into the details, then I would ask that you indulge me to allow me to respond to her a lot of her accusations or statements, since I was one who've been involved in that program for over a decade and actually had firsthand knowledge, not rumors and secondhand information. So I'm not inclined to want to dive into those details again tonight, but other than defer to the chair of the committee to say, is your recommendation to the council to take it up more tonight, to send it back to committee, or to take no further action depending on based on the evidence that was presented at committee?
Well, I'm respectful of Matt Lasay's statement that he'd like to hear from other council members, so I would like to hear from other council members. We have heard from Peggy and with what she presented. And so I guess I would ask if other council members have other comments or observations, then I'd particularly like to hear that.
I'm sorry that I'm going to go back to Councilmember Shepherd and let her finish her comments.
Go ahead, Peggy.
Okay, so Seattle has 22 sister cities, and they have a person over that program that's been with sister cities for 20 years. And they have a process where they have to, each sister city has to re-sign up for the program each year, and they have to provide financials, and they have to provide their plan for their program, and it's all very public information, so there's no aspect of feeling clandestine about it. However, the city of Seattle is looking at sister cities as something that they're considering of possibly ending, because they don't find it's, they've had some problems with it. On top of that, I went to the international site for sister cities, and I reached out to all of the contacts that represented Peruvian sister cities, and I was able to find one that was from Arizona State University that has an exchange program. I was able to contact most of the others, and they do not. So I think that this is something that's just not a common thing. There's only, I think, 10 cities in the U.S. that say they have an affiliation with the sister city in Peru, but they're not active. So that's the status of the sister cities. That's all I have to say.
John?
Councilmember Sunwell.
Thank you. Battle for power here.
I'll continue to chair the meeting.
Just wanted to know.
I guess I'll say two things, both very quickly, believe it or not. We had a fantastic experience with the Sister City program, and so I'm a huge fan of that. We hosted a young Korean girl. My wife spent about 18 months living over there, and it was a great experience for her and our kids to have that, and I hope that continues. That said, I have no idea why we're even talking about this, because it's unclear to me. I don't know what other action Bob could come up with. What are we going to do? What is the proposal that this city council does to that organization or on behalf of that organization? I mean, what if something bad happens with Snow Valley Little League that represents many kids in our city, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not taking public comment, just please. So until someone can tell me why we have a role in this at all and what action would even take, I feel like I just don't feel like we're spending our time wisely. I don't know what the taxpayers of this city, I think they're wasting their time right now unless someone can tell me what we would do. And if we can't do anything, then let's move on. If you don't like it, don't put your kids in the program. If you don't like it, lobby the organization to change cities. If you don't like it, don't participate. But I don't understand what it has to do with this council.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So one of the things that's different about Little League example and Sister Cities is there's an affiliation with our city, and it's an official affiliation. And I think there's I think that if somebody were really injured in another country, probably nobody would ever be sued because it's very difficult to sue anyone. But I really don't want to have somebody from our high school think that our city is saying it's okay to go to Peru. It is not safe. It's simply not safe. I don't think our city, there are a lot of exchange program opportunities without being affiliated with the city of Snoqualmie.
I mean, I'll just weigh in and say that I've actually been to Peru. I understand, Peggy, you haven't been to Peru. And what I witnessed down there was certainly some of the great disparity in wealth and poverty, as you'll see in many countries around the world. I would very much want my kids to sort of experience that and realize, we live in somewhat of a bubble, and it's a good thing in a global village, in a global economy for my kids to be exposed to those differences. You will go into Chaclacayo, even in many communities down there, and you will see just stunning, disturbing poverty of just shanty towns that have been built up into the hills of thousands of homes with no utilities, running water and whatnot. And then a neighborhood on the other side of the valley that looks like a gated community of the Eagle's Nest and Snoqualmie Ridge. Where do you think our kids are staying in neighborhoods down there when they go to Chaclacayo? We're not putting them in the shanty towns up on the hills. They're staying in neighborhoods that are often as nice, if not nicer, and safer and gated and secured, safer than some of our neighborhoods. And so I'm a little bothered by those that are speaking from second or third hand knowledge or from research on the internet versus first hand experience. And this is precisely the power of a Sister Cities program, particularly for youth, is, I've had numerous Korean kids come here, and their first comment is sort of a relief after the first week, because they said, gosh, we just heard so much about all the gun violence and the dangerous stuff in America, and it's really not dangerous here. It's pretty nice. That's the kind of eye openers you want for kids from either countries to drop those stereotypes and see other countries, other cultures in a more complex fashion. Councilmember Ross.
So I attended the Community Development Committee meeting and sat in the audience, and there was a student that got up and spoke about her experience, and then also a parent comment. And both of them really enjoyed the program. They had visited the different cities, and they'd also hosted. And in fact, I know my daughters, when they were in high school, had asked to participate in this program, and we had some other things going on, so they didn't. But now I wish that they had, because it sounds like an excellent program. Ms. Melgard, the president, say that no money was coming from the city. Mr. Ma, the treasurer, say there's no city funds, there's no inconsistencies in the finances, and so I don't see a problem with it.
So this is a strange situation for all of us. I mean, the city is not recommending action. The city is not bringing any matter before us, and there really isn't much action we can do. We were asked to look into it. We looked into it. It's not ours. We don't run it. We don't, I think that the fact that we have an association with them, that's important. So we should monitor that, and maybe we will disassociate ourselves as we look at it in the future. But I think we're about, call the question, or we're sort of, okay.
All right. Councilmember Holloway, and then if I could, again, I want to indulge, since I've been, look, the mayor is going to be a member of the Sister Cities Board by virtue of their bylaws. It doesn't matter whether the mayor is interested or not, they're an ex officio member of the board. So my involvement has been intense at times and very little at times. But at least I have a lot of firsthand knowledge of it. Councilmember Holloway, and a couple of points I would make before anybody is inclined to call the question.
Okay. So I did hear there were financial questions, as Councilman Ross said, which were addressed by past and current treasurers. There were questions of political affiliations of Sister City officials, which is immaterial to the subject at hand. There was discussion of city financial support, which doesn't exist. There was discussion about a young lady who was ditched by her host children, and I ask anybody not to find teenage girls who haven't at one time thought or done ditching of friends at the mall or whatever. I don't view that as the level of criminal law. I do ask, though, why would a city engage in a sister city arrangement with a country where the age of first sex, they rank 13th? In terms of assaults per capita, they're 7th. In terms of child poverty, they're 2nd. In terms of rape suspects, they're 10th in terms of capital. And I would ask you then to look around and be thankful they do. Those are statistics against the United States. I will give you the web link if you want. Some of them are by UNICEF. The job of the council up here is to get above the internet hysteria, and once you are elected, to provide community leadership. I think we did that in the review we did. The accusations, with the exception of one, which may be an expression to sister cities of what's appropriate behavior in a household that's hosting, but again, not to the extent that I view we need to make it a position that says this is not of benefit to the city. I think we ought to table it and move on.
So if I could, I just want to add two more points. One is, when we first started this program 10 years ago, I was very nervous about sort of assuming the responsibility for sending kids to other countries. And we did one fundamental thing in that respect is the Sister Cities program is well insured. There's a significant amount of money, up to $1,600 a year, that they pay to fully indemnify or cover all the board members and those active in that precisely for issues or concerns. There's been over 250 kids between those three countries that have gone back and forth just in the city of Snoqualmie Sister Cities program. If you'd have told me 10 years ago that after 250 kids there would be one incident, you used the word child abuse or sexual abuse, which I'm very kind of offended by, because there was no sexual abuse that was alleged here. It was a kid being present when some sexual activity was going on, perhaps in another bedroom. And as concerning as that might be, that sort of stuff goes on in the community around here every week. I guess if you'd have told me that was going to be, and there's a lot of disputes about exactly what the truth of that was. I'm hearing 2 or 3 different versions of the events. But if you'd have told me that was the most serious thing that was going to happen in 250 kids 10 years ago, I just said, oh my God, it couldn't work out any better. It's been wildly successful in that regard, precisely because, especially since it's an all volunteer run program. And that speaks to the diligence and the commitment and dedication of folks like Tina McCollum and others that have given of their heart and soul to that program, that they've been so caring of those kids and families, doing background checks and vetting out kids and families and host families to make sure to mitigate and remove those risks as much as possible. And I'm sure that some of those that have been host families, like the Sunwalls, have been through that process and know what that vetting involves. So again, I'm sorry to belabor it further, but I think it merits a response.
Call the unquestioned.
No, there's no motion on the table, so you could
That's why it was an unquestioned.
and call to end discussion. So, all right. I'm sorry? Well, there's no motion on the table for the
Nothing to
public to
discuss.
respond to, so. Councilmember Mayhew, did you want one more comment, or?
I didn't make a comment on this
Oh, you look
topic.
like you were going like this, okay.
I didn't, I didn't make a comment yet on this topic, and I thought Councilmember Jeans had asked for each of us to comment, so I was willing to make a comment.
You're not forced to comment.
Well, he was in the CDC committee, so I would certainly welcome your comment, but.
You know, all I would say is, I have the same reaction as Councilmember Sunwell, which is that I don't understand what we're being asked to do. Every day I wake up and the president has made a tweet I wish he hadn't made. I have to think about my trips in Africa and the children that are going hungry. There are many things in the world that are happening that are not good. When I sit here on the city council, I don't have the authority to do anything about any of those problems. If I can convince 3 other council members, then I might be able to do something that's within the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie, compliant with state and federal law. That's what I can do sitting here. So my question is, what are we being asked to do? And I cannot get clarity on what we're being asked to do. There's been no request. I don't know why we're talking about this. I hear complaints from some people about their neighbors. They don't like who's on the board of the association. They don't like who participates in activities. They want some details about organizational activity. None of this has anything to do with the city or anything we have the power to do something about. So I don't know if we're upset, that the concerns are about the way that the Sister Cities Association, which is not us, it's another entity, there seems to be some concern about how they're being run, but they don't seem to be things that require us to look into. They seem to be things that should be taken up with that association. I don't know if we're being asked to disassociate with some city, and I haven't seen any criteria. I looked at I found very compelling the city's ordinance that states what the goal of the Sister Cities program was. And I don't see how anything I've heard is inconsistent with that. So I'm just left not seeing anything for us to do. And so my comment is just that I similarly don't see anything for us to do. And I don't understand why we're spending time on this. And I think we should be done with this matter for now.
All right, I'm going to respect everybody's desire to move on by concluding with Councilmember Holloway, Shepherd, and Lassay, and then we're done.
Oh, okay. I was about ready to go with we're done. Well, so in the beginning of the Sister City Association, I think the leadership and the contribution of time from city officials was important to getting that off the ground. I think if there did turn to be a case of malfeasance or a true case of child abuse, we can take that leadership role again. Okay? The evidence did not support that, but I do think there's more than just us voting on ordinance within our realm. You have been elected, but now you are community leaders. So we do have that responsibility to occasionally apply guidance, but I don't think it's warranted in this case. Yeah. That was it.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I'd like to see us have, at the very least, have some kind of accountability as they do with the city of Seattle as far as balancing their books, making them open, telling us what their program is. I think that that's a good guideline to follow. But the original question, my concern about safety was just to stop our association with sister cities. That was my first concern. But if lacking that, I would like to see us at least get some annual financial accountability of what's going on and follow what the city of Seattle is doing with their 22 sister cities.
And we're going to conclude with Councilmember Lassay.
Well, I want to thank everyone for bearing with me and asking you all to contribute comment before I had anything to say. And I think this is one of those opportunities. I also, with the community, I appreciate the community is involved. I appreciate the community has concerns. And I hope that we can find ways to continue to engage the community in those discussions where it's necessary outside of our maybe legal boundaries of what happens within the city versus what happens within the community. With that, though, I think this is one of those times that as a council member, it's best that saying nothing is acceptable and doing nothing is acceptable, and that we move on and we do as we determine, and we monitor the situation, and if something were to come up and something were to be of concern to this council, that we would take action at that time. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, council. So with that, we're going to move on, take no further action. All right, any other report for Community Development Committee?
No report.
Finance Administration?
Actually, other than we'll be getting back to regular business at our next meeting, and we've got a lot of it.
All right. Finance Administration Committee report.
I think I'm going to wait till Committee of the Whole.
Okay. Public Safety Committee report.
I have a report. I'm going to talk a little bit about consolidation, exploration, scoping report. So the Snoqualmie Fire Department and King County Fire District 27, which is Falls City, have had an interlocal agreement for over 5 years where they have shared staffing and resources such as backfilling firefighters while fighting wildland fires, providing mutual aid, and hosting joint training sessions. And this relationship has seemed to work well. Both the fire department, Snoqualmie Fire Department and Falls City, are very similar. They both have single fire stations. They have a similar number of full-time employees. They have a robust volunteer firefighter program. Both have similar apparatus inventory, such as both have 2 fire engines and 2 aid cars. And both the fire departments have a community-centered approach, such as the Snoqualmie has their annual pancake breakfast, or in the summer you'll see them at the park spraying the fire hose on the kids during hot days. Or you may recognize them when you go to the grocery store. And the community approach is important to our Snoqualmie residents, as shown in the recent citizen survey scoring over 95% approval rating. So these single city fire departments are becoming less common. In fact, cities surrounding Snoqualmie and Falls City are now part of the Eastside Fire and Rescue. In the hopes of keeping our small town and community-centered fire department, the Snoqualmie Fire Department has approached Falls City to determine interest in whether they would like to partner in some format. And Chief Carrera is going to give us a kind of talk through the different options that he's approached him with.
Thank you, Councilmember Ross. That was a mouthful. I see this as being just an introductory item tonight. There's a lot of detail in the report, and the report was not designed to go into a really deep dive into all of the options that exist between our agencies, but more or less just look at, from a high level, what benefits or what challenges could be realized through a partnership with King County Fire Protection District 27. So what this report is, it's really looking at a high-level, non-biased overview of a few of the options that exist between our agencies. We actually listed in the report both the challenges and the benefits. We weren't trying to sway it in any direction. We were just taking an objective look at each of the different options that existed between our agencies. We did our best to estimate costs by merging our budgets, looking at cost avoidance, and then we also had some, based on some of the prescribed assumptions in the document. The budget that we used in the document are not conservative estimates. In fact, they're just the opposite. We actually wanted to make sure that we were being more all-inclusive, and a closer look at those could certainly tighten those numbers up and make it potentially even more cost advantages for both of our agencies. And then again, the staff report was developed by both myself, Chief Connor, staff within the fire department, but then also labor was represented on the group, both Falls City Fire District's labor representative and the Snoqualmie labor representative as well. Again, our goal was to create a fair and equitable evaluation. What this report is not, it's not an in-depth, deep dive look into the options that exist that would come at a later time if there's an appetite to look at any of these options more robustly. So just to give you a little bit of history about the departments, the Snoqualmie Fire Department, as you know, was established in 1939 as an all-volunteer fire department, and then Falls City was also established in 1946, and it's possible that the relationship began back then. More recently, though, in 2013 is when both agencies and the King County Fire District 45, which is part of Duval, they established a shared staffing and resource agreement. And what that document did for us is it allowed us to have firefighters from Falls City working in the Snoqualmie Fire Station and firefighters from Snoqualmie working in the Falls City Fire Station. Where this comes is into an important time of year is when there's wildland incidents going over on eastern Washington. We deploy our firefighters over to eastern Washington. We have a larger pool of firefighters to choose from. The advantage to us in that situation is we actually have trained and experienced wildland firefighters locally if we do ever have an event here. In 2017, we also evaluated sharing an administrative staff person. When Liz Luizo from the fire department retired, we approached Falls City about discussing sharing their person or creating an opportunity to try to have a shared person between our agencies, and that did not come to fruition for a lot of different reasons, but we did certainly look at that as an option. And then in August of 2017, King County Fire District 10, which is in the orange to the north and to the south of King County Fire District 27, approached District 27 about merging into their agency. I certainly can't speak to the details of that relationship, but as I understand it, what would happen is basically you would erase the borders around King 27 if the voters approved, and they would merge into King 10, and they would become part of King 10, and then they would also become part of Eastside Fire and Rescue because King 10 is part of Eastside Fire and Rescue. In December of 2017, we were tasked by the mayor and the city administrator and the board of commissioners to put together this scoping report, and then that was completed on March 31st, 2018. Since this report was developed, it's been presented to the Public Safety Committee for discussion. I've also met with the fire chief down in Falls City, and because King County Fire District 27 has the King 10 option on the table, they've established a community group, which is a representative of labor representative, volunteer, commissioner, and 3 or 4 members of the public and labor representative on there as well. And I've met with them one time to answer any questions that they may have had about the report specifically. This is a picture of Northeast King County and shows you the purple or that light blue surrounding Snoqualmie is actually Eastside Fire and Rescue, and then Snoqualmie is the purple and Falls City is the green. If Falls City Fire District 27 was to merge into Eastside Fire and Rescue, their area of green would turn the similar color of violet or blue. And as you can see, we would be a standalone agency surrounded by a fire district of, I believe, over 200 square miles is what the service area of Eastside Fire and Rescue is. So where did this concept come from? We approached this last year as part of our strategic planning effort. This is right out of our strategic plan that was adopted earlier this year. If you recall, we hired a ESCI, a private consultant, that specializes in fire service agencies to conduct our strategic plan. It involved both the community, it involved the internal firefighters, the different groups within our agency, the volunteers, the labor representative members. I did not participate in the process, and one of the goals that came out of it that relates to this is number 2B, which is talking about regionalization and more specifically, collaborating with our neighboring agencies on training and things like that. Exploring expansion of police services like North Bend Police Services, agreement to include the provisions of all emergency services with North Bend, and exploring the development of a regional fire authority with local partners. So as part of the strategic plan from both the community and from internally, the direction is to evaluate these to see if there is an option here or something that would be beneficial. We're not talking about creating an Eastside Fire and Rescue. What we're talking about is really trying to build something in the region that we can be part of the architecture of if we were to go down the path of looking at a partnership with King County 27 or even the Upper Snoqualmie Valley people or agencies that are up here right now. So as Councilmember Ross indicated, there's 4 options that we're looking at. Those are the options on the list up there, and I will dive into these just a little bit. And again, these are really high overviews. I didn't put any numbers in here. But first of all, we're talking about a shared training officer. This would be a single full-time equivalent employee that we could share between our agencies. It establishes a dedicated training officer, improves the level of quality of training that we're providing currently, and then would avoid future costs for both agencies as we would have that shared employee working for both of our agencies. We put in here as option 2 a shared administration, which joins the administration and focuses on future of both organization. Really, at the end of the day, option 2, if there's an interest in that, was really designed to focus on option 3 and 4 later down the road. Option 2 allows the staffs to come together, merge into one administration, align policies, procedures, labor agreements, and all the other day-to-day operational documents that we work by, and then put them in line so that we could move into option 3 or option 4 if there was interest later down the road. Option 3 looks at an interlocal agreement form of merged agency. It's similar to the provisions of how we provide police services to North Bend. One agency would likely be the lead agency. We would negotiate governance, oversight, costs, all those other pieces that go along with it, service provisions that are part of it. And in the end, it really does the goals of what we were trying to do, and that is improve staffing and the training needs in both agencies and look at ways to save some costs with the fire service. And really, if this is a success, then you could potentially look at option 4 later on down the road. With that, there's a lot of questions, though, that exist with option 3, as there would be with option 4. Option 4 is a voter-approved methodology. We put this in here as an option just to keep it in the discussion, but understanding that this is a far-reaching goal that we saw as a group. And keeping in mind that there would be a lot more education and detail that would need to go into this operation, or into this option, I mean. This looks at either merging the city into the fire district, which I don't think we're in favor of specifically. I know that's not the vision that in conversation that we've had, but in the interest of full disclosure, that would be one of the options that are on there. I think what we're more interested in, or at least evaluating, would be a regional fire authority. And what that does is actually allows both agencies to come together, write a plan that the public votes on, and then if the council is interested in heading down that path, it would be put on the ballot, and then the voters would vote on it, and then would create a new agency that would oversee it. Generally, when those come together, based on those other agencies that you see up on the board there, both the councils and the districts come together, and there's representation from both council and from the commission board on that group. Again, this report isn't designed to go into a deep dive over this, into these options, but at the end, our goal was to look at the different options that exist between our agencies. I'm certainly going to advocate that we not dispose of any of the options that are on the list, just because we haven't even had a conversation yet with the Fire District 27 Commission. There's a lot more education and information that certainly can be provided if there's interest. And I'd also like to advocate at some level to get some direction of where to go from here, which would include setting up a meeting with Falls City to have a conversation of what their interests are. As again, when I open this, I see this as an introductory item today. It's the first touch that you have all had on this document. And with that, I can certainly answer any questions that you may have.
Councilor Snow.
Can you go back one slide, please, Chief? So it talks about if you went to an RFA, that would allow the city council to be part of the governing body. Now, Falls City doesn't have a city council, is my understanding. So what would be their representation in it, or am I missing? Or would it be King County City Council, or King County Council, or what would be their representation?
No, because I was presenting this from the optics of the city, it would be the city council from the city side of the agreement, but their fire district commission would end up sitting on that group.
They're elected commissioners.
They're elected fire commissioner. They're a board of fire district commissioners is what they are. There's been a few agencies that have come together as of late. One was a city and a fire district that joined together, and they shared in that responsibility. It was council members that sat on that group. And obviously the advantage to that is it removes some of that competing interest side of it, where there's a levy that needs to be passed, or there's some other initiative that's coming from the city that can conflict sometimes with a junior taxing district that provides that service, where if there's that joint governance, it allows the planning to happen much more seamlessly, and for the council really to still be involved with the management and oversight of the organization.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Chief, thanks for the presentation, keeping us updated on what you're doing. One comment I would make is I think to help me understand kind of from the city's viewpoint these things, it'd be really helpful to see some focus on the outcomes that might be different for our, and I'm not saying tonight, I'm saying as you go forward. What outcomes to the citizens of Snoqualmie would be produced by, whether it's each of these options or whatever you're pursuing? And there's sort of there's outputs and maybe you talk about that. So we have this many fire, you talked about some of that. We have potentially a shared fire service, training officer might save some money. But outcomes, so faster response times, I don't know what they might be. You did talk about some training issues and some cross personnel during the fire season, but, really help us focus on what would this do for the city. I think back to my understanding about the police contract with North Bend, and one of the things that's always stuck in my mind is the chief talked about, he used the term force multiplier, and kind of explaining my understanding of that is when an incident happens, so if I just take a purely Snoqualmie point of view about it, there's now a larger combined police force that can respond to that. So just help me kind of understand what the outcomes are to the city's citizens.
Sure.
So if you could do more of that going forward, that'd be really helpful.
Certainly, yeah, I can come back with more information on that.
Which would include cost savings, I assume, or?
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
All right. Any other questions, Councilmember Jeans?
Chief, the Eastside Fire and Rescue is very much interested in Falls City. Is that a fair statement?
As I understand it, yes. Yeah, they approached them about doing the merger between their agencies, and they've been discussing it since August.
And so they are actively pursuing Falls City. So sort of what is the timing of sort of making a decision as to whether we want to go forward? Is there enough time before Falls City is going to be forced to make a decision?
Yeah, so that would be an excellent question for Falls City, if we had representation to go down there and meet with them and have that conversation. As I understand it, I attended their meeting, their Board of Fire Commissioners meeting last Monday, after the F&A meeting here, and just to give them an update that it was being presented tonight, and there'll be discussion at tonight's council meeting. And at that meeting, they implied that they have a deadline of August to put, if they're going to put something on the ballot, which means to merge into King 10, would be August of this year. So as I understand it, there is still some breathing space to have that conversation. Again, it's really up to Falls City to determine what their level of interest is as well. And that's the deadline that's kind of looming out there. The other part of the conversation that's come up is Falls City has a maintenance and operations levy that they use. It's a little bit different than what we do here, but they have their flat property tax levy, and then above that, they can levy some more funds to help offset their budget costs. That next levy comes up in 2020, and they see that as another potential deadline down the road as far as moving forward.
Bob Larson and then Councilmember Lissay.
Chief, could you expound on Councilmember Jean's question about the force issue? I understand it's not obligatory, it's more voluntary. They're looking at this option. They're not being forced into anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I compare it to the approach that we've taken thus far as well. Falls City didn't solicit this bid, if you will, or this interest from King 10, as I understand it. My understanding is that King 10, or Eastside Fire and Rescue, approached Falls City about merging into their fire district and then becoming part of King 10. Along with those discussions, because we've been having conversations all along, in conversation with the fire chief, he thought it would be a good idea for us to put in at least some options that exist between our agencies so that they can look at everything. From conversations with Chief Connor in Falls City, my understanding is they're looking really at three options. One is the King 10, the other one is a relationship with Snoqualmie, and the third one is actually standing alone and continuing to function as a standalone fire district. Those are still options that are on the table.
Councilmember Lissay.
We've had a few emails being shared relating to the union as well. I'm just interested if, I believe, and Lucas Hughes, if you are here, I think you're over there. I think I saw you in the corner. If you'd like, if there's anything to add, and if the chief, if you're open to that, I don't want to get into, we're not asking to get into a negotiation by any means, but interested to get your input as you had some comments to make.
I only have one caveat, Lucas. Yeah. I don't want a grievance because you were asked to come testify and now you're working, extra overtime or something. So I assume this is fine with you,
if you're willing.
Absolutely, no.
To volunteer testimony?
All right. Yeah, I guess I would just more or less thank you, Nick, for having me up here. I just would answer some questions if there were any questions, and I just didn't want to have any confusion, there was an email that was sent out by the labor representative overall for the 2878. Our name was attached to that, and again, I was unaware that that letting was coming out, and it was just a little misleading on the Snoqualmie Firefighters group. Snoqualmie Firefighters definitely support Falls City and looking at all of their options. At the end of the day, we would love to have them do something with our fire department, with the City of Snoqualmie Fire Department. If that that's not in the cards, and they do something with King 10 or the standalone, we're going to be okay with that at the end of the day too. I just wanted to make sure that was not misunderstood. Does that kind of answer some questions a little bit, kind of dancing around the top of it? Been a tough situation being a part of the local, the 2878, which we are all in Falls City, Duval, Snoqualmie, and Eastside. And then also being a Snoqualmie firefighter. I want to do what's best for Snoqualmie citizens, and I want to do what's best for my brothers and sisters down the hill in Falls City. And I want to support them the best that we can in whatever their options are going to make. So end of the day, whatever's best for them is what we're going to support. So was there any questions or any follow-up on that? I hope that made some sense.
Thank you. I didn't have any follow-up. I just wanted to give you the opportunity since I asked if you were willing. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we kind of understood where we stood. And we definitely support Falls City and support hopefully doing something with us. And if not, that's okay too.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for volunteering to testify. I'm sorry, Councilmember Ross? Or who?
Did you have yours? I think one of the things that we wanted to do was to bring forward a resolution that would, so it would cover all the options. So we wouldn't have to pick anything specific. But it would show that the council's interested in it and that we can take it to Falls City and show that we're considering it as well.
That's not just coming from the mayor administration, but the council's
Right.
open to exploring some of these outcomes if they're beneficial to all the parties. Yeah. Councilmember Holloway?
Okay, so, all right, we may have questions of actually what that agenda bill does, but that'll be another night.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Holloway, speaking of the.
Okay, so I do want to go back. Years ago, there was discussion of Eastside Fire doing Snoqualmie, and that was not supported by administration nor by fire staff. So I'd really like to know what's different as we get into these discussions. Further, I would look to North Bend as a lessons learned. They did relegate their police service to an outside entity, and the final outcome was they came back to us. You've got a real high speed bump to take me over before I would go for relegating fire service in Snoqualmie to an external or a broader entity than the city. I have a hard issue of letting go of that. Maybe it's just me, but I don't want to go down the path that North Bend did with their police service. So that's just my 2 cents.
I like the comment. One of the distinctions we saw is what we liked about the Falls City or the District 27's programs is they're very much sort of very community oriented. You saw pictures of like the firefighters shooting the water cannon with the kids in the park on a hot summer day. You know, passing out glow sticks on Halloween, the bicycle rodeo with the police department. I mean, just very, very heavily involved in community activities, and it's a high touch sort of. And Falls City likes to be the same way. It's very much a fabric of the community and the community's identity. So we always had a lot of trepidation about losing that, merging with Eastside Fire and Rescue, and particularly the volunteer program that's connected with that we don't think Eastside Fire and Rescue supports in quite the same way, and we think that makes this a very strong, unique program in that regard. Just a lot of vested stakeholders and interest of having local community members volunteering in that department, which might make option 4 a little nervous for you for that reason too. I suspect others, but.
I have no problem with a contractual partnership or relationship. I have problems of relegating the responsibility of fire to another entity.
Give it away. Councilmember Mayhew?
Yeah, I was just going to say my sense is that option 4 has a big question mark on it for me. As I understand our residents' satisfaction with the police department, with the fire department, my understanding is that satisfaction is very high. Our response times are very impressive. My understanding of the community view of our police department is that the fire department is that it's outstanding. And so an option that would involve our fire department leaving or even going under partial control of some other entity, I think might be a very controversial thing. It might take a lot of time for the council to think about. So if you're thinking about moving forward and you're sort of looking for discussion, my point of view would be options 1, 2, and 3 look like absolutely things that would seem like great to move forward on. I think option 4, moving forward, asking the council to support moving forward on that might be a much more challenging discussion.
Right. And I think we're fine with 1 through 3, right? That we would move Falls City on that and maybe down the road.
Is there anyone that
option 4.
disagrees with that sentiment?
Yeah, so just if I can speak on that just really quickly.
I figured you might want to.
When we put this document together, we really tried to focus on, both ends of the spectrum, if you will, something that's very non-invasive to something that's extremely invasive. But again, keeping an eye on learning throughout that process that we go through the entire time. I explained to the groups when we were meeting down with Falls City that with the brand new council and the history within the city of the fire department, that throwing option 4 on the table, a regional fire authority, would be a non-starter right off the bat. But if we were to look at other options where we can try to build some experience with each other, get to know each other a little bit better, and really what we're talking about doing is taking the best of both of our departments and expanding on those and showcasing them as the proof of concept, for lack of a better term, of why it makes sense to do a partnership with each other. So I'll certainly work on the outcomes. I certainly understand the sentiments as a fire officer who's been through a city separation into a regional fire district. I understand it. I totally understand it. But I'm just glad to hear that there's the willingness to have the conversation, to learn more about it and look at it down the road versus saying, no, we're not interested in that ever, ever, ever. So.
All right. Thank you, Chief. There's no further on that discussion. That's a great way to cue it up. The discussion will continue. And again, like as Councilmember Ross says, we'll look to bring a resolution back with some further clarification, but I appreciate the feedback tonight. Any other report for Public Safety Committee? Councilmember Ross?
Nothing.
Now moving on to the Committee of the Whole. Councilmember Holloway?
Okay. So memorial service for retired Snoqualmie Police Officer Sergeant Chris Todd will be held this Friday, May 18th at 2 p.m. at the Snoqualmie Valley Alliance Church. Chris was hired in December of 2000 and retired in April of 2016. Due to his long service, many of our staff who worked with Sergeant Todd have expressed a desire to attend the memorial service. However, our current personnel policies state, page 20, section, memorial service for employees may be attended by other city employees during their scheduled workday with approval of their department head with no loss of pay or accrued leave. This leads us to the issue that Chris Todd is not a current employee. So this section does not address funeral attendance by prior employees. There is desire by mayor and some members of the council. We would like to approve a one-time exception in this particular case. Along those lines, I would like to motion to authorize that. So I move to approve a one-time exception to Personnel Policy Section 5.12.2 to allow staff to attend the memorial service for Sergeant Chris Todd, a former employee of the city of Snoqualmie, during the scheduled workday with the approval of their department head with no loss of pay or accrued leave. May I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second is stated by Councilmember Holloway. Any discussion, Council? All right. Councilmember Jeans?
So is there a sense that this can be done, that they can take some time off and get back to work, or would that literally be the end of their day?
I could respond to that.
Schedule.
In some cases, they would be coming back to work. For instance, I would expect to come back to work for late in the afternoon. I think others would as well. Depending on the, after the memorial service, I'm sure there's going to be a gathering. There'll be some type of a social, if you will, or at least, meeting with the family. But I would expect that some would come back. Those who are actually on duty, I'm not sure. You can ask Chief Phipps specifically about the police and fire departments. But I know staff from the other departments, there's quite a few that want to attend, and they would be expected to return to work if their schedule would permit and allow for that at the end of the day. I believe the service is at 2 p.m.?
Yes.
Yes.
2 o'clock, and I anticipate it not to last any longer than an hour, and then there'll be a reception afterwards where people can gather. So it shouldn't go on that long. As far as the impact on our community, the officers that are working are still going to be subject to be in this city, so.
All right. If there's no other questions, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Are there any other items for committee of the whole?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah, Bob, do you want to speak to the internal controls update?
Yes, we're ever so close. However, with the recent addition of our new director, last Monday, we're going to take a little bit extra time and have him review it as well. And so I expect that to be out within the next 10 to 12 days.
Welcome to Snoqualmie.
Thrown right in. Councilmember Shepherd, then Sunwell.
So, goals and objectives, do we know when we're going to get a schedule of when we're going to proceed on that?
Oh, that's mine, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was due on last week, and I apologize for not getting it out. I will get it out this week. I wanted to wait to get the information back from Andrew Ballard. We also were getting the minutes typed up, but we got those now, and I'll send those out sometime this week. I'll get them out to council. We'll get them out to all the board and commissions that the council had requested with specific instructions for them to comment on any objectives they want to have council consider. After that, I'll get the schedule out, but I think I'm anticipating, again, if council's interested, maybe I should be asking this question directly to council now, but I'm anticipating recommending through Mayor Larson that we bring Andrew Ballard back to continue the facilitation of the objectives part of doing that work. But I'll get back to Mayor Larson and Mayor Pro Tem Holloway in that at a more recent future date here. In the meantime, I will get the calendar out, but I expect that we can still meet the goal that I had set for and asked for middle of July. I think that's ample time, but we've got some overlap of some of these commissions and committees we're going to have to get to at least once, if not twice. So.
And
Councilmember Holloway, go ahead.
we did look at the parking lot issues in FNA and did prioritize those, and at least in FNA next week, 1 or 2 of those we're going to at least talk about in FNA, hopefully to bring back to you shortly.
Start setting up round tables to discuss those. Thank you. That's the issue I was going to address. Councilmember Sunwell, sorry to skip over, but he was still talking about the same items.
I'd like to make a motion to extend our meeting past 10 o'clock.
Oh, thank you. That's the other thing I was going to do. Motion to extend the meeting past 10 o'clock. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Councilmember Liston.
My comment is, once we finish the end of committee of the whole discussion on this item, I have an announcement.
Okay.
It's just, I'm going to be away next week.
Oh, okay.
Nothing dramatic.
Sounds so ominous at
And
first.
so I will not be attending both the Parks and Public Works Committee meeting and the Community Development Committee meeting, as well as will not be representing at the Planning Commission.
Okay, could you summarize that in an
I
email
will
for
send that
Jody?
email. I just wanted to get it on the record.
He'll be
so
gone next
Jody
week.
knows about
Yeah.
it.
So was that your
There's the
announcement?
summary.
That's my announcement, that's it. I just
All
want
right.
to make sure it got in there.
Got it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Mayhew?
Yeah, there's been some press around the closing of the Stillwater Bog observation deck, and I'm just wondering if, I don't know, whatever the appropriate committee could be assigned to just have a quick discussion with staff about that, just so that some committee, and maybe just report back to us whether there's any committee involvement needed. It has the impression that maybe there's a lack of funding for something, and just want to make, I don't know if any of that's true, but perhaps the appropriate committee could look into that.
Probably Parks.
I'll bring it back to staff, and I would presume it'd be Parks and Public Works Committee.
Yeah.
But I'll put a note, and Jody, make a note to tell that to Dan too. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other items for committee of the whole that we were missing? Or we all good? All right. With that, any announcements?
There is one, Mayor, I mean, everybody knows here from council, but the Snoqualmie Valley Government Association meeting is this week, correct? This Wednesday?
Wednesday evening,
Yeah.
hosted by North Bend.
And this is a change from typical protocol, so it's a little bit earlier in the month. If you haven't responded already, you'd like to attend, please get back to Jody tomorrow.
Okay. And So staff reports, so as we know, are written in the first meeting of the month. However, at this time, are there any other comments from the staff? All right, seeing nothing, we will, any citizens' comments prior to concluding tonight's meeting?
Oh, Mayor, excuse me, I'd be remiss in not saying thank you to the council for that exception on the personnel policy. Truly appreciate it. I know the number of staff will clearly benefit from that and the opportunity to attend the service for former Sergeant Chris Todd. Thank you.
Monica, did you have your hand up?
Thank you. It's actually more of a question, and I know we don't have dialogue here, but I would like to know what the status is on the environmental impact statement for the mill site. There are several people wanting to review that document, and we were told last year it would be out by maybe March or April, and now we're into May, and I'm just not hearing any discussion at any of our council meetings regarding progress with the mill site expansion and the environmental cleanup issues that so many people have concerns with. So I'm hoping you can maybe squeeze it on your agenda one of these few meetings coming up in the future so citizens can have an update. It would be appreciated. Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, if council would like, we can get it on a future update for the committee of the whole, if you like. I'm not sure what we can report out, but I'll ask Mark to give whatever information he can.
Well, quickly, I mean, Mark, it's going to go to the Planning Commission and be a very public process and be vetted there first, correct?
Absolutely. I can give you a better update. We have a meeting this week to ask that very question so that we can give an update at some point. After that meeting, it very well may be that staff starts saying late July at the earliest, but I don't know at this point.
All right, thank you. Bob, go ahead.
Well, just, sorry, to clarify the process, the EIS, when a draft is submitted to the city, it'll be reviewed by Mr. Hoffman and staff and his consultants, and then a draft is formally issued by the SEPA responsible official, which is Mr. Hoffman, and there's a public comment period on that draft before then a final is issued, and then that document would accompany the application to the Planning Commission.
Right.
So it's an extended public process that goes along with this.
Right, and then after that extended public process with the Planning Commission, only then will it come to the council. And I guess I'm reticent about having too much conversation with the council, given that that is a quasi-judicial matter, so I don't know if we want to get in the practice of doing regular reports and any of the details of that to you folks at this time. So.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Mayhew.
I'm sorry, I was making a note and I missed just a tiny part of what you just said. The mill site is going to be quasi-judicial?
Yes, it is quasi-judicial, and it is pending right now.
Thank you.
All right. But are there any other, I'm sorry, I didn't finish other members of the public that wanted to comment. Are there any other members that want to comment at this time? All right, seeing no one else move forward. Councilmember Holloway, did you have something else?
No, it's just back to the other if you do the reporting here, it's part of the public record.
Do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, at this time, we're going to go into executive session. Regular meeting is in recess, and I call for an executive session regarding potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, Section 1II. I ask that Bob Larson, Bob Sturbank, Mark Hoffman, Nicole Sanders remain. The executive session lasts approximately 20 minutes, and there may be action following. We also have an executive session or two regarding collective bargaining. The regular meeting is in recess and call for two executive sessions regarding collective bargaining pursuant to RCW 42.30.140. Bob Larson, Deborah Vigil, Debbie Mills, Mark Carrera, and a representative from the Cabot Dow are asked to join the session. The executive session will last approximately 30 minutes, and there may be action following. Everyone else can go enjoy what's left of their long evening here.